Good morning. It's 9 o'clock and time for the September 6, 2011 meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. We're going to begin with an invocation led by Deputy Teddy Floyd, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by County Administrator Joseph Baird.
Let us stand. Let us bow our heads. Father, we come to you as humble as we know how. Father, we're asking that you look over us, guide us, and protect us as we go through with our daily business. God, we ask that you give us protect and look over all of our administrators, our county commissioners, our sheriff, our police chiefs, everyone in their respectable positions, God. And when it's over, God, we ask that you just bless them, protect their families, God, and we'll be ever so careful to give you the praise. Let us say amen.
Amen. Please face the flag. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, gentlemen. Next, we have additions and deletions to the agenda. Emergency items. Are there any additions or deletions? We have a motion to approve from Commissioner Davis, second from Commissioner O'Brien. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Passes 4-0. Next up, we've got a proclamation, which will be presented by Commissioner Davis. This is a presentation of a proclamation designating the month of September as Sickle Cell Awareness Month. And this will be received by Yvette Corsi. Is Ms. Corsi here? Good morning.
Come on up, Ms. Corsi. Good morning.
Good morning.
This is a proclamation designating the month of September as Sickle Cell Awareness Month. Whereas sickle cell is the most common hereditary genetic blood disorder, although predominantly affecting members of darker races, it is a global disease and affects persons of all backgrounds, nationalities, and ethnicities. Whereas Sickle Cell Foundation of Palm Beach and Treasure Coast, Inc. is a community-based, nonprofit, tax-exempt organization that seeks to improve the quality of life for persons with sickle cell disease or sickle cell trait and members of their families. And whereas, in addition to education and community awareness, services include screening, counseling, family support groups, normalization and socialization activities, providing information and education to parents of newborns who test positive for sickle cell trait. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County that the month of September 2011 be designated as Sickle Cell Awareness Month in Indian River County, and calls upon the people of Indian River County to join their fellow citizens across the United States in recognizing and participating in this special observance, adopted this 6th day of September 2011, signed by all 5 county commissioners. Ms. Corsi, welcome. If you'd like to say a few words, please feel free.
Thank you so much. Good morning. I also have with me Mr. Charlie Hudnall, who is the vice chair of our board. We are very pleased to be here to accept this proclamation. We certainly thank the members of the commission for providing this, and we thank you for your support. I don't know how many of you are aware of our activities. We're having a walk on the 17th of September, and in the Treasure Coast, it's going to take place at Sand Hill Crane Park in Port St. Lucie. We're also having a series of professional development workshops on exertional sickling. Exertional sickling is something that has relatively recently come about. It's a relationship between persons who have the trait, which means they do not have the disease, they're a carrier, and sports. You probably have heard of some sports figures, particularly football players, who have collapsed and died. In most cases that you've heard about, this is probably exertional sickling. So we're having a workshop on that because we think it's important information that the community needs to be aware of, as well as coaches, athletic directors, trainers, parents, your park and recreation personnel who have athletics and sports activities would also be invited. It's going to take place in St. Lucie County at the school district on the 19th of September from 5 to 7 p.m. You are welcome to attend. There is no charge for that.
Okay, great.
And I just have a packet of information that I would like to leave with you that tells you a little bit about who we are and what we do.
Sounds great.
And Ms. Corsi, is there a phone number for people who might be interested in on the September 17th walk? A phone number or an email address that they can get some more
The
information?
telephone number is area code 561-833-3113. The email address is thesicklecellfoundation@yahoo.com, or our website is www.sicklecellpalmbeach.org.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice having you. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, sir. Thank you very much. You're too kind as well.
Sure, absolutely.
We next have the approval of the minutes of the budget workshop of July 13th, 2011.
Move to approve, Mr. Chair.
Motion to approve from Commissioner Davis.
Second.
Second from Commissioner O'Brien. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 4-0.
Did they remove the other proclamation? I don't see, is Vicky here? The other proclamation?
I don't see Vicki
Presentation.
Wild here right now. If she comes, we'll add it.
Okay.
I'll just ask, is there anybody else from CURB here today? No, if she comes, we'll let her speak then. The meeting of July 19th.
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve from Commissioner Davis, second from Commissioner O'Brien. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Passes 4-0. Next up, we have the consent agenda. Would anybody like to remove anything from the consent agenda? There being no items removed.
Chairman, move approval of the consent agenda?
Second.
Motion to approve from Commissioner O'Brien, second from Commissioner Wheeler. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 4-0. We move on to public discussion items. A request to speak from Mr. Pete Schraman regarding the PEP REIT. Mr. Schraman, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Name and address for the record, please.
Pete Jarman. I live in Sebastian for the last 35 years. Long enough to watch a native Jaguar walk across A1A back in 1981. So, I don't know when the last one was there, but that's the last time I saw one, 1981, cross A1A. Hey, thank you. I appreciate the time you're taking to listen to me. What I'm going to talk about is building a better Band-Aid for the loss of sand up on the barrier island. Everything we've done so far, you've done, or whoever you want to put it, has been a Band-Aid, and we have to keep doing it and over and over and over and over again. Every one amounts to quite a bit of money. So I'm suggesting that rather than do that, let's go back a little further. About a month ago, I attended a meeting of the Mayor's Committee, where they get together once every 2 months, I believe. And they had a big discussion about studies, and what to do about it. And they proposed another study for another $238,000. And I guess it's another one of those same studies, but if they take a look at what Mother Nature did about 10,000 years ago, there was a reef at where it is now our barrier island, and it was created by a very jagged type reef, a coral reef, and it trapped sand, and gradually the sand built up, and we have a barrier island. My suggestion is that we get out of the 19th century technology that the Army Corps of Engineers is using, and get into the 21st century. And this way, if we create another reef off of our barrier island, trying to assimilate what the Mother Nature did with an irregular reef rather than the PEP reef, which is a bunch of flat slabs of concrete, doesn't trap anything, everything washes over it. They had a big argument at not an argument, but a discussion on whether it was effective or not. And obviously, even the experts, the engineers, couldn't agree whether it was effective or not. They couldn't find any real evidence that it was effective, but they couldn't find any evidence that it wasn't effective. So there was a discussion back and forth. So I said to one of the engineers, how about Mother Nature? She seems to have solved the problem for you. Why don't you kind of follow her lead? He said, well, she seems to know what she was doing. I said, well, why don't we build a reef? We can get a reef built free as far as the material is concerned. We tear down bridges, we tear down buildings, we tear up roads, and we end up with a lot of concrete rubble. When they haul that rubble out to the solid fill area, they have to spend a lot of money. It's very expensive to dump it out there because it weighs a lot. I'm sure the demolition people would be most happy to donate that to building a reef. So that's the material. Now, going back a little bit more, how would you eliminate pumping sand or hauling sand? Well, you wouldn't. So you'd have to continue to do that, but every time you do it, you're spending anywhere from $10 to $15 million to do it. $8 million was it started out for this one. Now it's up to, I think, $14 million if my numbers are correct. Before you're finished with this the current pumping that you have, or now it's hauling, not pumping, it's the current hauling. Buy a dredge. Go into the dredging business. Now, it's not unique. I thought it was unique to come up with the idea, but I find out that the town of Cocoa already owns a dredge, and they do a lot of dredging up there. In fact, they just finished a job dredging for Cocoa Beach. And this was all under the auspices of the Army Corps of Engineers. They approved it. So buy a dredge, a tug, and a couple of barges. Number one, you can do your own dredging. Take it out there during the season when there's no nesting, obviously, from the 1st of November to the 1st of May or whatever the dates are. And then when there is nesting season, bring it inside and do some dredging inside, maintaining channels or mooring areas or whatever you want to do. Even you might even do some private work and make some money with the thing. So you end up with a dredge, a tug, and a couple of barges. And in the meantime, as you pick up the material, you can take the rubble that you're going to get for free and build yourself a reef, which is the best thing to protect the barrier anyhow. And we're going to have it this time because I understand there's a lot of erosion from the hurricane we didn't get, but we got the effects of it. So this is an idea that I think is thinking a little outside the box, but it's not that far outside the box, and it would eliminate a lot of the erosion. Not all of it. You're never going to eliminate all of it, but you eliminate most of it. And while you're building that reef, you can do your own dredging. It's a one-time expense as far as capital expense, and after that, it's a matter of labor. So I think you save a lot of money. Just an thought. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.
Okay.
Commissioner Davis and then Commissioner Brown.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just to let you know, at the next, to say it's on the 19th, I don't know, is that right? Yes. At the City of Vero Beach, they'll actually be discussing that, from what I gather, a little bit more in depth, exactly what you're talking about.
Well, I presented it to them when I was there.
Yeah, and perhaps that's the impetus about what they're talking about this next go-around.
Good. I'll be there.
Commissioner Bryan.
I think with Commissioner Davis, I think we had scheduled to have a joint workshop with the Beach and Shore Committee, county commissioners, and then the mayors were invited to that meeting. So it's going to get everybody in to sit down and talk about some of the things you just brought up.
Go ahead.
What's the date of that meeting, Commissioner?
I think it's Monday, September 19th.
It is. I'm trying to figure out. It's going to be at B501, which is that here?
Across the street. Right
Okay, where we have our MPO meetings. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Then that'll be at 3 o'clock, 3 to 5.
Right.
I'll see to it you get a copy of that.
Mr. Sharman, hope a lot of other people come to that meeting. Next up is public notice items, and we have a notice of scheduled public hearing on September 13th, and I'll let Mr. Plotwich take that.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. First is a notice of scheduled public hearing on September 13, 2011, to consider adoption of an ordinance amending Chapter 103 of the Code with respect to committee member terms and to address and correct certain inconsistencies in housekeeping matters. That's a legislative matter. Number 2 is a notice of scheduled public hearing on September 13, 2011, to consider adoption of an ordinance removing from the Code any provision relating to firearms and ammunition. That's also a legislative matter. And the third item is a notice of scheduled public hearings on September 13, 2011, September 20, 2011, and October 18, 2011, relating to redistricting of the Indian River County Commissioner districts, and that's an administrative matter.
Thank you very much. I'll also mention on the redistricting, we do have the proposed maps outside in the foyer of the Maine County Administration Building if anybody would like to take a look at them. And I also believe you can get a copy of the maps and more information on the redistricting from our website. So,
Mr. Chairman, we'd also should have mentioned that the September 20 public hearing will be held in the Sebastian City Council chambers.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Next up, we have departmental matters. First is community development, a request from Waterway Village developer to extend time frames for completing internal sidewalks and a second lift of the asphalt. Mr. Bowling, good morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Stan Bowling, County Planning Director. This is a response to a request from Waterway Village, and it regards extending bonding out time frames. Just a little bit of background. The county subdivision regulations allow bonding out for completing required subdivision improvements, and those improvements and the timing of those improvements in some respects is tied to COs for individual homes within the subdivision. The basic improvements like roadways, drainage, and utilities have to be in place before any CO is issued. But we also have some types of improvements that can be delayed beyond the CO for the first homes, and those two cases are internal sidewalks and the second final lift of asphalt. And the internal sidewalks are sidewalks that are placed along the internal streets that are new in the subdivision. The same with the second lift of asphalt that goes on internal streets within the new subdivision. Subdivision regulations were changed in 2009, and there is now an allowance in the code to tie internal sidewalks to individual home COs. And what that means is that the sidewalk segments that will be in front of houses don't have to be completed until the house is completed and gets a CO. So they're done at the time that building construction happens on the lot. That change was made so that those sidewalk segments, if they're put in too early, they can oftentimes be damaged or destroyed completely when a home goes in for construction. So that change was made in 2009, but there are still bonding out requirements that are allowed for internal sidewalks, and developers that have been ongoing for a while with projects such as Waterway Village are under those requirements. The bonding out of internal sidewalks option, it was reduced from a maximum of 10 years to 2 years. Under the old code, there were 2-year segments that were allowed, several extensions that would total up to 10 years, and currently it's only 2 years. With respect to a final lift of asphalt, that has not been changed in our code in a number of years, and a 2-year maximum is what's allowed in the code. And this is where a developer goes in and puts in an initial layer of asphalt that meets county specs, and then they structure it and design it to have a second and final layer after a lot of the home construction has been done. And if you drive through a subdivision, you see that initial coat is about an inch below the curbing and an inch below the manhole. That means that second layer has not been put down yet, and that gets put down later in the life of the subdivision. Waterway Village, Phase 1, I wanted to show on an aerial. 58th Avenue is over here toward the left-hand side of the image, and 49th Street down here along the bottom. Phase 1 consists of actually 3 subphases, A, B, and C. C is this larger phase to the east of Waterway Village Boulevard and essentially to the west of 51st Court. This is a 2010 aerial. And you can see that a lot of Phase 1C has already been developed at this time in 2010, but along Formosa Circle, in 2010, there were no homes under construction. Currently, if you go out there, you'll see there's about a dozen homes in this area. Some are complete and some are under construction right now. But it'll be probably at least another year and a half, probably before Waterway finishes construction of homes in this area. And their request is to allow sidewalks as well as the final lift of asphalt in 1C to have 2 more years, to be allowed to be extended for 2 more years so they can complete the construction in the subdivision. And their upcoming deadlines for those internal sidewalks, the contract for the sidewalk is up next month. The letter of credit runs 90 days beyond that. For the second lift of asphalt, that contract is up at the end of this month with a letter of credit, again 90 days beyond that. The proposal that staff supports is to extend the optional bond-out period for internal sidewalks and for the second lift of asphalt from the current code provision of 2 years to 4 years. And there's a couple reasons for doing that. One is the pace of home building remains slow. And a 2-year time frame for building out, even in these sub-phases, does not seem to be line up with reality. And 4 years seems to be a good amount of time to allow for that. But 4 years is also a reasonable time frame for completion. And that's kind of the other end of balancing these regulations, is to make sure that at some point in time, all the sidewalks are in, the final lift is in, even if there are a few vacant home sites left, to have those improvements finished. And that 4-year time frame may actually be closer in time than when a homeowners association is turned over to the residents. Those two finishing improvements, the final lift and the last segments of sidewalk, it might actually be a benefit to have those delayed a little bit until close to the time when the homeowners association is turned over. But the bottom line is staff supports the 4-year time frame versus the 2-year time frame. And so staff's recommendation is twofold. One, that the board directs staff to initiate a formal LDR change to extend the bond-out period from 2 years to 4 years. And there's some draft language in your backup items, a pretty simple change to the ordinance. And second, that the board invoke the pending ordinance doctrine, because we do have some specific changes in mind, and allow processing of extensions. I'd be glad to try to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Stan. Any questions for staff? Stan? I've got one question. Is there any provisions anywhere so that the present people who live along that area and new purchasers are notified of just the time frame?
About a change in the time frame, or the time frame you mean period?
Well, actually both. For the people who live there, about the change in the time frame, and for new people about the time frame. And just like people to know that it's happening, not anything.
Sure. Really twofold. One is the county does not directly contact lot purchasers or home buyers about the requirements. The developer tends to do that. But before we have a final inspection, we have a maintenance period where improvements are guaranteed, like roads and drainage and utilities. And there is a sign posting that's required, and the county goes out and posts signs before the final inspection so that residents can see the signs, and sometimes they contact engineering or planning asking about those time frames. And that's before the final security is released and the final inspection is done by the county. So that's where the county actually notifies by sign posting the residents that are out there.
Thanks. Any other questions for staff? Anybody? I'll just ask Bruce, come on up. Name and address for the record, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Bruce Barquette, and I'm here with the applicant. Staff did a great job making the presentation and for the justification. As far as your question about notification, we'd be happy to put it in the newsletter.
I think it more helps you than anything, because it just lets people get the questions answered before they get worried about it.
That's a good suggestion, and I just checked with my client. We'd be happy to do that.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Anybody from the public want to say anything?
Mr. Chairman, just a couple of years ago we worked on this with an ad hoc committee, and actually Mr. Barquette was part of that group, and a couple of the other local developers and architects, and we were looking at some of our permitting processes, and the sidewalk issue is one where I think Bruce and I probably will still have a difference of opinion. Bruce would like to see no time frames, and I thought from the county's point of view, we for the people that move in there, they need some type of resolution that they know the sidewalks will go in, the road will get done while they're still on the house. So the 2-year period was kind of a compromise. And I think like a lot of things we've done lately, like with the landscape ordinance where we made some changes, we left it in place for a year or two, saw how it worked, and then staff worked with the stakeholders and said, you know what, maybe the pendulum did go a little bit too far here, and better place is more back in the middle. And I think certainly we're probably in that same position right now on the sidewalks, where given the housing recovery, it's going to be a very long time coming. that 2 years might have been a little too much of the pendulum, and coming back to 4 years is a more logical and a good compromise position. So I support what staff has proposed here, and actually would like to go ahead and make the motion that we do direct staff to initiate the process to amend the site plan regulations and to invoke the pending ordinance to allow this to go forward.
Second.
There's a motion from Commissioner O'Brien, a second from Commissioner Davis, and I'll just like to add one thing, which is in the backup, but for the benefit of the audience. Why would you have this type of delay? And one of the reasons is that if you put a sidewalk in and then have construction of a house afterwards, trucks go back and forth over it. I mean, just yesterday during my walk along near Con Beach, there's a new house going up, and its sidewalk, which was there previously to the house going up, has been destroyed. And it's similar reasoning for the asphalt. You have these heavy trucks going in and out. They're dropping off materials. They gouge the asphalt. So this allows the internal building to be done prior to what's called the final lift, and that you end up, I think, with a better product all along at a more reasonable cost. So that's basically, I think, the reasoning. So we have a motion from Commissioner O'Brien, second from Commissioner Davis. Any other comments? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 4-0. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We now have Departmental Matters Utility Services, the West Regional Odor Control Study, the final payment request, and I believe we'll have Mr. Olson.
Move staff recommendation.
Second.
Motion from Commissioner Davis, second from Commissioner O'Brien. Any comments or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Passes 4-0. Utility Construction Standards, September 2011. Mr. Olson.
I'd just like to hear a little bit on this one.
That's fine. Absolutely. Good morning.
Well, good morning. For the record, Eric Olson, Director of Utilities. This particular situation is what we do on an annual basis. We review our construction standards. Quite often, the changes represent changes within DOT project standards. We match those standards against ours. A specific example in this particular case, on all DOT projects, their new rulings now eliminate our ability to put in concrete around valve pads in the middle of the road. So we've modified that to simply utilizing asphalt. Some of the other standards within the process are more mundane, type of concrete within manholes, types of valves that we would typically use. But what this does in modifying the construction standards on an annual basis, it brings it up to sort of a normal ability for us to be able to tell all the engineers and construction people that would be bidding on a project, this is what these are our standards, abide by these standards, and it should give us a good job at the end of the project like that. So generally, again, these are things that we do on an annual basis, review them, take a look at them. As-built drawings in this particular case, one of the elements that is different from historical process, we use GPS locations. GPS and GIS is very critical to us today. All of our valves are located by GPS recordings. If you go into our GIS drawings, everything is located on a GPS basis. So we can get this data. We can locate it from the field. We can locate it typically in the night, whatever the case may be, instead of having to struggle and locate by magic or whatever like that. So if there's a particular question, I'd be glad to answer.
The only question I have is is there a dollar figure about what you think by adopting these standards things are going to go up to or down to?
Actually, we're probably going to see them as neutral. They're going to be any change at all. I'll give you an example. In the case of DOT standards, we just simply reflect those. So it's not going to change anything for us one way or the other. And quite often, the changes that we make are after the discussions with engineers and consultants anyway. So it's sort of a neutral process, very little effect one way or the other like that.
Any other questions?
That was kind of my question. Just, do you see any of these as a undue or unnecessary burden or unfunded mandate, or are they all kind of logical suggestions?
On the opposite, one of the things we want to be very careful about is we don't want to set standards that are unrealistic. We don't want to be in a position to be able to tell a project engineer somewhat after the fact, oh, by the way, you have a moving target. This sets it in place. They know exactly what it is ahead of time. And typically, as I say, we work with them ahead of time. So it's not something that's a surprise. It's sort of a give and take process that everybody works out on an equal basis.
Okay.
Move staff recommendation.
Motion for Commissioner Davis. I'll go ahead and second it. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Passes 4-0. One more, Mr. Olson. Spoonville Marsh Wetland Facility, additional oyster beds.
Again, for the record, Eric Olson, Director of Utilities. This is one of our projects that clearly has met the standard of being outside the box. In this particular case, as the Commission is aware, we've been actually utilizing the Spoonville Marsh for a full year now. The success of the project has been evident by DEP. DEP has actually sent tours from bringing people in as far away as Tallahassee, Orlando, just to go through the process. They've even gone so far as to allow us to permit future changes, recognizing the important elements of some of the evolutionary processes that we're taking into account, such as the oyster beds. It allows us to make changes, and they represent to them sort of the state of the art. One of the things about the Spoonville Marsh that we've always said is different from most projects. It's a multiple benefit project. We could have gone out, we could have done deep well ejection, that's a process. This allows us to be in a position to be ahead of the curve with respect to nutrient removal requirements that are clearly coming from the federal and state levels at a later date. These TMDL or nutrient removal levels are kind of been put aside for the moment. Trust me, they haven't disappeared. In this particular project, much like the Egret Marsh, much like some of the other projects that we're going to be putting in place, it allows us to be ahead of the curve. The Spoonville Marsh to date, in 1 year, we've removed over 2 tons of nitrogen that would have normally been going into the Indian River Lagoon and nearly a half a ton of phosphorus. This is just part of the project, so we're ahead of the curve. We didn't do it for that particular reason. It's one of those benefits that came along. It's just thinking a little bit out of the box like that.
Commissioner Davis.
Mr. Olson, because we're doing it now, I'm assuming it won't be like most other government programs that they'll say, oh, well, it didn't count. We need to move from tomorrow's date on or something.
Some of the comments from DEP sort of focus exactly on that. DEP out of Orlando, the district that covers Indian River County, has noted that the changes that Indian River County has put in place has already been seen in some of the seagrass beds within the lagoon. The positive effects, the catcher over here, as I would call it, the multipurpose catcher on the main relief canal, the Egret Marsh, the Spoonville Marsh, we're beginning to see nutrient level removals already at this point. So unlike many other communities in South Florida, they're going to be hit with this thing. We're ahead of the curve by already getting started in the process. And as I say, they may have slowed down, but 2 and 3 years from now, when the paradigm changes back again, they will be forced by EPA to begin implementing this process. So Indian River is kind of ahead of the game like that.
I think more to answer your question, so far with the BMAP things, they've set a date in the past a few years to say from this point, so it won't be starting as of 2012 generally with the measurement goals you have to meet. It'll be a date of about 2008 or 2010. So these projects, which we've been doing at least so far in their process, would be captured and we get the full benefit of
we get credit
for the nutrient removal that we've had.
Yes. That was my concern. I just wanted to make sure that we were doing such a good job that we've set the bar so high even we couldn't jump over it.
And we also did get an email, I think, from DEP to indicate that we've met the nutrient removal requirements through 2013.
Yes.
So that if they had set them back then,
we would have already been ahead of the curve like
we'd
that.
be well ahead of the curve.
Right.
And I think we'll stay that way in River County.
Move staff recommendation.
I have another question, if I could. As we build up these oysters, have we given any thought yet to any sort of public-private partnership for the use of some of the production?
We actually have had a lot of discussion with some of the oyster people in this sense. Department of Agriculture is actually looking at us as sort of an experimental process to where this could in fact be taken into a process where we can utilize this as a seed culture bed for other areas. Yes, the answer is that we are looking at that, working with the Department of Agriculture, and could it be that Indian River County becomes sort of a focal point like that?
And I don't know about the other commissioners, but I'd be quite happy if we get to the point where we allow somebody from the private sector, like the Sembler Company, to come in and get some of the benefit from the oyster development in exchange for the management of the beds. And I think
they're already looking at it at this point.
Okay, I think that'll be great if we can do that.
Mr. Chairman, to follow up to your point, in the back of it says that a large number of blue crabs, which were predators of the oyster, were relocated away from the site. I'm kind of thinking they were relocated to a pot of boiling water.
Somewhere. We didn't ask where.
It happens.
There were a lot of them.
Well, thank you very much. Do we have a motion to approve staff recommendations?
Yes.
From Commissioner Davis. Second from Commissioner Wheeler. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes 4-0. Thank you very much, Mr. Olson. We now have county attorney matters. Initial review and discussion of proposed Indian River County secondary metals recyclers ordinance. Mr. Plackwich.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Assistant County Attorney Brooke Odom will make the initial presentation.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Brooke Odom, Assistant County Attorney. Chapter 538 of the Florida statutes regulates secondary metals recyclers and the purchase and sale of regulated metals property. Secondary metals recyclers are those businesses or people that are engaged in converting ferrous or non-ferrous metals that have served their original economic purpose into raw material having an existing or potential economic value. A regulated metal, as defined in the statute, is any item composed primarily of non-ferrous metals, which are metals like copper, brass, zinc, nickel, bronze, and lead. Despite the regulations contained in Section 538.19 of the Florida statutes, Indian River County continues to experience serious problems with the theft of regulated metals property and the subsequent sale to secondary metals recyclers. The County Attorney's Office has been working with the Indian River County Sheriff's Office to draft an ordinance imposing additional, more restrictive regulations upon the secondary metals recyclers that will assist the Sheriff's Office in preventing the theft of regulated metals property. Right before agenda submittal, we received an email from a member of the Sheriff's Office requesting additional items be added to the ordinance. We will work through that with the Indian River County Sheriff's Office, but it is not yet any proposed ordinance before you today. We're bringing the proposed ordinance before the board today for initial review and discussion. If the board agrees, the proposed ordinance will be noticed for public hearing and adoption in early October. There are 4 additional requirements in the proposed ordinance that are not present in Section 538.19. Most importantly, the proposed ordinance creates a list of enumerated regulated metals, which are most often involved in thefts. And it requires that the payment of these certain regulated metals be provided by check or electronic transfer to the seller of that property. The statute actually requires that any purchase price over $1,000 of any regulated metal, not just the certain ones that we've set aside in the ordinance, that at that point the $1,000 threshold is met and then a check be required. But we have strengthened that by requesting that or proposing that it be done within any of the enumerated any of the enumerated metals. And also, the proposed ordinance requires reasonable proof of ownership of the certain regulated metals, which may include a bill of sale or a receipt. The statute just requires a statement from the seller that they own the property. The proposed ordinance also requires the secondary metals recycler to notify the Sheriff's Office within 24 hours of a sale or attempted sale of any of the regulated metals, the certain enumerated regulated metals. The statute just requires that the seller maintain records of sale at his or her place of business and be available for inspection upon notification by law enforcement. The last addition in the proposed ordinance is that the secondary metals recyclers have a fax machine or other equipment capable of receiving notification from the Sheriff's Office that there's been a theft or any stolen property that may come their way. This statute doesn't address anything with regard to fax machines or any kind of notifications. In 2009, the Florida Attorney General issued an advisory legal opinion that the county adopt additional, more restrictive regulations than those contained in the statute. And as a result, several counties and municipalities have adopted such ordinances imposing more stringent requirements. The proposed ordinance before you today closely follows those ordinances. Secondary metals recyclers are required by the statute to register with the Florida Department of Revenue, and the Florida Department of Revenue records identify 5 recyclers in Indian River County. Copies of the memo and proposed ordinance were provided to each of the recyclers from whom the county attorney's office was able to locate. I believe a few of them are actually present today. Our recommendation is that the board determine whether it wants to move forward with adoption of the ordinance imposing additional, more restrictive regulations upon secondary metals recyclers, and if so, offer comments or suggestions with respect to the proposed ordinance and authorize the county attorney's office to advertise for public hearing to consider the final adoption. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just make one note. The memo that you received in your board package did say that there were 8 registered secondary metal recyclers in the county. That was my miscounting. Actually, there are 5, and we did locate all 5, and we did provide notice to all 5 with a copy of the memo and a copy of the proposed ordinance, and also notifying them that there would be a discussion today, and they were invited to attend. And I believe several have.
Thank you. Any questions from commissioners?
I have a question, but it's more for the sheriff than Brooke.
I've got one for Brooke then while she's still there.
Sure.
I couldn't tell by reading it quite if a kid collecting aluminum cans would be caught up in this at all.
No, not covered.
Okay,
not covered by the statute or the proposed ordinance.
That's why I wanted to make sure. I couldn't really make the distinction of where somebody with a load of cans would be cut off from somebody with a load of aluminum or a load of copper.
No.
What if they were selling lemonade in those?
Now, then we had to regulate that, yes.
This is, obviously where my worry comes from.
Yeah.
Thank you and good morning, Commissioners. It's indeed a pleasure. This ordinance that proposed ordinance, we hope certainly that you will adopt in September or October, actually. But I think it's healthy for you to realize that with the crime trends that are going on throughout the state of Florida, you are continuously seeing different copper, different brass, different aluminum being traded through the secondary metal handlers at outrageous records. In fact, in Indian River County alone, we've had over 200 in the last 90 days of these types of transactions. Gentlemen, we're talking about folks that are showing up with manhole covers, with guardrails, these types of things. We're not talking about the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts that are collecting aluminum cans, or you that tear down your aluminum shed and bring it into the scrappers to get a few dollars. Specific to the list that you see in the proposed ordinance is consistent with other ordinances throughout the state. This is another tool that law enforcement can certainly use. We have similar ordinances throughout this county dealing with other things that you've been helpful with us. For example, when you go to a pawn shop, there's more information taken from a pawn shop than there's a scrap yard. But gentlemen, when we have folks showing up in a pickup truck with 6 or 8 brass mailboxes that we know did not belong to them, we need a way of recording what's going on. General Counsel Harpering with the Sheriff's Office is here to be a bit more specific, and I would certainly appreciate your support in this matter. Jim?
Good morning, Commissioners, Mr. Plakowicz, Mr. Baird, Madam Clerk. The specifics as to the ordinance are very narrowly tailored, and I know that you have concerns in regards to the specific question of will this impede business in any way. And our position is it will not impede lawful business, and I can't say it any more concise or directly than that. And it's a very important tool for us in the Sheriff's Office to fight what is otherwise an epidemic in this regard. And the list that you see is very narrowly tailored in order to address those types of things that we have seen and have become common, not only in Indian River County, but throughout the state in regards to the dealing in stolen property, essentially. I don't think there's any other way to put it directly. For example, if you were to go to a DOT auction and purchase damaged guardrails, you're going to have a receipt. It's not going to be an issue. You can scrap it. If you have an aluminum shed, as the sheriff mentioned, something along those lines. If you are collecting cans, that's not an issue. But if you show up with a manhole cover or a funeral marker or a funeral vase or 30 pounds of copper wire, then you're going to fall under the provisions of this particular ordinance. As the sheriff mentioned, this ordinance is not new or unique in regards to not only our area but the state. It certainly is a trend for the Board of County Commissioners throughout the state to address the issues that we're having with this type of theft and then the sale at the secondary recyclers. So I'll be happy to try to answer any questions if you have any.
Any questions for Mr. Hartman? Commissioner O'Brien.
Yeah, the question I have is, the current law requires a secondary metals recycler to maintain records, including a physical description of the seller, take a thumbprint, and either a photograph or video of the seller. So I guess with those restrictions already in hand, why is that not working? And if getting a thumbprint and a picture of the guy not doing it, then how is, coming in and saying, well, did you write a check for this guy? I mean, if they're not taking the guy's thumbprint, they're not taking his picture, I doubt if they're going to write him a check. So I'm just not sure. My first question is, why is the current laws not working?
Well, the current law isn't working because it doesn't specifically address the types of items that we have specifically articulated. As to your other point, the manner in which a thumbprint is taken, the record upon which it is taken, the type of paper, the circumstances, whether or not that person has a thumbprint in a database that we can search and reference, whether or not they're using a false name or a fake name, are not specifically addressed. And the reality of it is that the state law has certainly failed, as recognized by the Attorney General's office, to address the type and the nature of the thefts that we have. As always, as with any particular change in the law or the ordinance, it's not the lawful seller that we're looking to address or target. It's the unlawful seller and the dealer in the stolen property that we believe these additional restrictions will address. And again, I will note that it's not unduly burdensome in regards to the business because of the specific items that we have articulated in the ordinance as having been identified as those items that are most regularly subject to theft and to unlawful sale in the secondary market.
And I think, Commissioner O'Brien, just to help out a little bit on that, part of the issue is right now the recycler gets that information and holds that information. And in effect, the information exists in a place where the sheriff really doesn't know it's there. What we've done in the ordinance is said, okay, if the metal is one of these specific types of metals that we're particularly concerned about, the manhole covers, the copper tubing, things like that, then the recycler will have to notify the sheriff that there has been a transaction involving one of those special items. So there's that, it's an information link direct to the sheriff's office that will basically alert the sheriff when a transaction has happened relating to these specific items.
And it also allows us the opportunity to notify the scrap dealer when we have several thefts over the evening or over the weekend immediately. One thing, Commissioner O'Brien, that please remember that the current pawn shops now have pawn slips, and they must forward those pawn slips to us immediately. So we already have a mechanism in place, not to compare scrap yards to pawn shops, but they're very similar in the transaction of what's going on. Again, you read about the copper theft, you read about the air conditioning thefts. Those are happening because an air conditioner can be stolen at midnight and sold at the scrap dealer at 6 or 7 a.m. With virtually no one knowing about it, and then that air conditioner is scrapped. The homeowner's out of the air conditioner. The scrapper has his $50 or $100, and the scrap dealer has the precious metal. Just another tool that we need.
Commissioner Wheeler?
Yeah, I'm just curious as to how you came up with the $1,000 to create a check or a wire service.
That's in the statute, Commissioner. In our particular ordinance, the provision in regards to the copper wire is a weight trigger. In other words, in excess of 25 pounds. Then the ordinance will kick in. The $1,000 is in the state statutes, and that's as to any regulated metal.
Well, what would prevent somebody from bringing it in $200 lots or $998 lots? I can see where the checking and so on and so forth would be a a good follow-up to go back, because that person's not going to lie about their name if they're going to have to go cash a check. And I think the $1,000 may be high based on what you said and what we're looking at here, because it's the same thing with IRS and $10,000 checks. So people deposit $9,999 to get under that.
And again, the $1,000 trigger threshold is a state statute issue.
But we could go below that, could we not?
We could. We're actually using a different trigger, which we think is rationally related to the thefts and the secondary transactions, which is actually an amount of weight as to the copper. As to all the other enumerated or articulated items that are on there, there's no value amount, so they still have to go through the process if it's a manhole cover, regardless of the amount that they're getting for it.
Let me try to help clarify, too. What the state law says is if any secondary metal is sold in a transaction $1,000 or above, it cannot be paid for by cash. That's one of the weaknesses. Your question is pointing out a weakness in the existing state law that we're trying to solve with this enumerated list of specific items. So with this list of specific items, the manhole covers, the copper tubing, the air conditioners, with those items, we are saying in our ordinance there is no cash transaction allowed. So we have tightened and eliminated the loophole that exists in state law with respect to these specific items. So I hope I answered.
And for the most part, these are items that you wouldn't find in your house.
No, and also, Commissioner Wheeler, it opens up a better electronic or paper dialogue for those folks so we know who they are.
Right.
Any other questions for the sheriff or his attorney? Thank you very much, Sheriff.
Thank you, Chairman.
I'm going to ask now if there's anybody from the audience who'd like to speak on this. Sir, come on up to the podium, please. Name and address for the record.
How you doing? I'm Shannon Cook with Indian River Scrap Metals, 4600 45th Street.
Good morning.
I guess, the ordinance that they're proposing, I'm not against helping catch a thief. I hate him as much as anybody else does. There's a lot of things in here that don't make sense to me. For one is, you name manhole covers, you name things like that. We don't buy them. We've never bought them. We've never been caught with them. The problem with all this stuff is especially like the payment area for the checks. I don't have a problem with giving a check. No issue with me. Except for the fact where they put in this section, they didn't mention the fact that they want you to mail it to their address on their driver's license or ID. What happens about the guy that comes in from Mexico that's got a passport? I can keep going and going and going on those issues. I don't see really where the issue would be that I couldn't hand him a check. There's a paper transaction made. He's got to go to the bank. He's got to cash it. That's a large load on us. Yeah. Now you got to think about now the checks that don't get cashed, things that don't go through because of the issues. Now it's going to mess our bank accounts up. And the $1,000 thing is actually pretty good because of the fact that it slows down the amount of checks I send to the bank. You got to figure 200-300 customers or so a day or whatever. I'm going to be sending it to checking. The bank's going to hate me. And it's you kind of got to consider impact of every business involved. The regulated metals that you have listed. Let me go through real quick if you don't mind. An electric light pole or utility structures. That's a pretty broad range. But okay, a guardrail, of course. A guardrail is going to be marked as further in the ordinance. Going to be marked on it that it's a DOT guardrail. So yes, we would already report that. It'd already be done. Street signs, of course. Is a no-brainer. The copper thing. And they put a weight restriction of 25 pounds on copper for that you have to go to the check and you have to do reporting and all that. I've got an idea that might make it a little easier this. Right now when you walk into my yard, when you come in, you're on video. When you go across my big scale, you're on video. When you go over to the small scales to sell the stuff, you got specific sites. You can see what you're selling. Everything's saved. It's thumbprinted. It's ID'd. They're on, when they're signing the papers, there's a camera right in their face that records it. I keep everything in DVR. It's always available, always provided. I think most of the stuff that's needed is in place now. I think more or less than, putting a lot of load on us and the banks. And you got to figure my job is pretty tough. I mean, it takes a lot to run a scrapyard, and putting more on it. I understand it's helping the county as well. But in my yard, I haven't had. They come in, they're looking for the stuff. The stuff that they look for, they find. I've had several of them come right in. They ask me, you can come in my yard and say, have you bought 25 pounds of copper? Certain date. I go, yes, here it is. Here's the guy that did it. You can come in there and ask, was there CA fin, which is the air conditioner coils? How much of that was sold in this day? Boom, just like that. You can ask me all those questions. I can answer them just like that through the computer. Now, maybe instead of all this, on your restricted items that you have, which I don't have any problem with your restricted items, because historical markers I wouldn't buy, funeral markers of course you wouldn't buy, railroad equipment you wouldn't buy. All this is already in play. All this is already done, so it doesn't affect us. The condensing coils, I'll get to that in just a second because I agree with those in a way. The stainless steel forklift things, no big deal. Beer kegs we don't buy, catalytic converters. All this is good. Everything's fine on here. Instead of having to go through all the hoops, the checks, everything else, why don't we keep a track of everything on your restricted list every day with everybody's with everybody's information, what they sold. I even make a derelict form up, which we do now with vehicles. Like somebody right now, which we newly come into the county, right now somebody come in the vehicle and buy it, sell it, and not have a title. Because a lot of vehicles are out there in this world without titles. So what the state did is they came up with the form as a derelict. You're claiming ownership of it. A modified derelict would say, okay, this is over 25 pounds of copper, so here's your derelict. Fill out total information, where you got it from, what it's for, your name, your thumbprint, your ID, and I'll turn that in of every one of your regulated metals. But it doesn't affect us everywhere else. We don't have to keep track of all the bank stuff. We don't have to. You fill a lot in here that could be simplified, I think, is what I'm trying to say. Right now we have, you say, in all due respect, you say that, you go in and you can steal over the weekend and come in and cash it in on Monday morning, right? But I got video of it. I got video of everything you've sold. I've got video of you selling it, you coming in the yard with it in your truck, you signing the papers for it saying it's lawfully yours. Let's just put it to the fact now where we make it easier for them to know what we've bought. And if there's a theft that comes through their desk and they say, okay, we're missing 50 pounds of copper. Well, here's a transaction for 50 pounds of copper right here. Let's check this out. There's his lead. And you're catching the criminals instead of running them to another county. Get what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. If you imply things where they're not going to sell it to me, then you're not going to catch them. They're just going to go somewhere else and sell it. They're going to come up with other ways of doing it. If there's ways for them to sell it, and they're willing to say, I own it, this is what it is, this is where I got it from, and they put their thumbprints, their IDs, and everything else on it, it's a form that they actually have to say, this is where I got it. Because you got to understand, what you don't realize is there's a whole lot more than thieves out there doing scrap. There's a lot of good people doing scrap. A lot of good people. People that you wouldn't even believe doing scrap. I know people that live on the beach, that live in beautiful houses. They're trying to pay their stuff that they need to pay, so they're doing whatever they got to do to scrap. Now, there's a lot of guys that go out on garbage days, right? Every garbage day. They know every place that is out there, garbage days. They go out, they get them. They cut all the electrical cords out. They take all the washers and dryers. They take the electrical motors out. They strip the coppers out of electrical motors. They come in a lot of copper. They're not thieves. These are the guys that are good, You'll still have record of everybody that does it. What I guess I'm trying to say is, don't punish the people that are legitimate and doing good for something the thieves are doing. Yeah. I think what they're trying to accomplish is good. I think it could be done much simpler. And I think most of it's implied right now. One of the things I don't agree with, it's impossible to mail checks to people. It's going to mess our accounts up. It's going to mess the banks up. It's just going to make a mess. Handing them a paper check, that's awesome. I don't mind that a bit. For your regulated metals or whatever, that's fine. I think through recognition of what they're selling, proof of where they got it from, which, you got to figure, I just bought 14 acres, okay? On that 14 acres, there's stuff everywhere. You know, I can't prove it came from my property. If I bring it to me, how can I prove it? I could just tell you I brought it from here. No, that's not proof. If you sit down and you make a written statement that says this is a felony if you fill this out incorrectly and don't tell the truth, which is what the derelict forms for the cars, and my receipt that you fill out when you sign it at my yard, if you fill it out wrong and you lie on it, it's a felony. It's already through the state. The moles are already implied. So filling these out, I mean, the criminal's filling his name out for you. He's giving you his address. He's telling you where he got it from, and he's thumbprinting it and giving you an ID. I think it's better than running them to somewhere else that's not going to make them do that. You know, which there's things being adjusted and being done all over the state. You're right, you know, because there is stuff out there. But, you know, we don't have to run through the hoops. If you look at our county, you know, we're a pretty small county compared to not what size-wise, but community-wise. A lot easier ways of going about, you know, not taking things out like Miami. I don't want to be like Miami, do you? I mean, I don't want to live like we're in Miami. You know, we do have theft here, you know, and I do guarantee you a lot of the theft that happens here doesn't come to us. It goes out of county. For simple reasons is the sheriff's department's overran already. They have a hard time getting into us. If they take it out of the county, they're not getting it because it's not going to come back. They can fill out even the form that I'm talking about, and they still not get the criminal because all they're going to do is go 3 counties away where they don't have the manpower or the money to go that far and check and see if they have it. And, you know, you punch in, you're looking for something, you know, 50 pounds of this 3 counties away, you're probably going to get 500 hits on it. You know, so it's better to keep them in the county selling it to us, you know. And believe me, they're not smart. You know, they're not. You know, I had a guy break into my yard, steal 480 pounds of copper at 3 o'clock in the morning and come back the next morning at 10 o'clock and try to sell it back to me. You know, so we're not talking about intelligent people. They will sign a piece of paper saying it's theirs. You know, they will sign it because most of the people that are doing this stuff, most of them have drug problems. And a drug addict's going to sign a piece of paper. He's going to go to jail for it. And it's happened, I don't know how many times. You know, in my yard, they just take them away because they come and get. I bet you the success rate in my yard for conviction is 100%. 100%. If they come in, they see the person, okay, you have this is what we have, they're done. They don't even go to, I've never been, I've got a stack of summons this big. I've never been to court because they plea up before they go to court. They got video, they got thumbprints, they got IDs, they got signatures. They got 5 different cameras showing them what they're doing. And it's all they get. All they got to do is plug their flash drive in, and it's on theirs to my DVR. You know, so I think the laws are in place now. I think we could modify them a little bit, make it work better, and help the sheriff's department. I do want to help the sheriff's department because I understand they're understaffed. They're, you know, they have a lot of issues to deal with as well. But let's not ruin our business doing it. You know, you're talking about actually applying a lot of stress on us by doing this.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Davis.
Mr. Cook, thank you very much, and I appreciate your input. And I guess really my question would be, what is the significance of having the dealers mail checks versus handing them checks? Because I understand the paper, I mean, just the nightmare as far as 44 cents, and I know that seems insignificant on the face of it, but it's not. And it's a pain in the butt to have to mail a check out and all that.
Keeping track of, make sure, what if somebody said they don't get their check? You guys didn't send it to them.
I agree.
Now we got a 3-day ordinance that says we got to have it there within 3 days.
Yeah.
It didn't get there, you know.
I'd answer that in a couple of ways. Number one, the ordinances that we looked at as our model, Orange County, Hillsborough County, City of Orlando, things like that, I think that each one of them had that same requirement in it. And I'm going to, in part, defer to law enforcement on this, but I believe there is a law enforcement advantage if they have an address that they can track down, because if I'm thinking that if you hand a check to somebody, I'm guessing that person can go to a check cashing store and get the cash and kind of be gone, and there's no real record. Whereas if you've mailed it to an address, at least law enforcement has a better place to start. Now, again, I'll defer to law enforcement on that.
But at the same time, everything, when we come up, when I buy it, I get your address. I get copies of everything. I get thumbprints, your addresses, your tag numbers, your picture. I get everything. I mean, nothing more than that check's going to say. Nothing. It's exactly the same. And I understand that maybe you're looking for time. I mean, you want us to post the check, whatever, but I got to be able to hand my customer the money for their product when they leave. Because if I don't, you're just opening a huge picture of just bad stuff happening to me. No, you didn't give this to me. You didn't do that. Well, this check wasn't what it was supposed to be. Or, you know what I'm saying? It's just going to be one thing after another for me when it could be settled and done and over with. And there you go. They got to go now further the paper trail because they got to go to a bank and give another ID matching what they said it was in order to cash it. IDs, I mean, everything.
Commissioner, this is just another step in legitimacy. And let's not take our eye off the ball. And the fact is that, gentlemen, I think it's Mr. Cook already has mentioned, it is a drug problem. That is why they're coming in here. If you're running a legitimate business and you're turning in a significant amount of metals, you're running a legitimate business. You probably deal in checks. And one day for a check is not a big deal. By issuing a check is not a big deal throughout the state of Florida. The other counties are doing it, and this works. This is another way of tightening up the ongoing problem that we're continuing to have.
Sure.
Yes, sir. And this is small.
No, I understand. I didn't hear him say he had a problem issuing the check. It's mailing the check.
Yeah, checks are fine.
He said checks are fine.
Well, I don't see
you got to remember, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Come a little closer to the microphone so the public can hear, please, Mr. Cook.
Yeah, hold on. This isn't really a debate, so why don't we let Mr. Cook finish, and then we'll bring the sheriff back up.
Well, the guy that comes in, let's say he's down visiting from up north, or he's vacationing, or he's down, he owns property in Florida, but his address is up north, or he's from, I get a lot of Spanish customers that use passports, which is legal identification. They do leave addresses. We get as much information as we can on everything, but those guys, just how do you get their checks to them and make sure, like I said, it just opens up such a variety of things. You didn't give my check to me. You never sent it. How can I prove it? I got to send certified mail? So I can't prove I sent it. If I send it in the mail, where's the proof? They say even here I got to have it to them within 3 days. I got to prove it. So I can say I sent it all I want. I think it opens up a negative into my ends, like if there was a dishonest secondary metal recycler, I sent you the check. What'd you do with it? You could postpone monies. You could, just so much easier to finish a transaction when I'm done. After that, it's in law enforcement's hands. After it leaves me, it's in law enforcement's hands. I have all my records, videos, thumbprints, explanations. I'll do that. I'll say, okay, you bought more than 25 pounds of copper. Here's your explanation. Where'd you get it? Thumbprint it. ID it. Address it. Phone number it. Where can I, it's just short of DNA, basically. So I think right there, when they come in, and I'll take that piece of paper because it's one of their regulated metals, and I'll put it in a file. And at the end of the day, if they want, I'll either fax it to the sheriff's department or deliver it, because it's right down the road, or deliver it right to them. So every day they'll have a record of every regulated metal that I bought. They'll have names, who sold it. They'll have the thumbprints, their tag numbers, their addresses, their phone numbers, right then and there. You're going to catch the thieves that way. If it is a drug addict, we're not doctors. We're not police officers, so we can't determine something's stolen. We can't determine if, this guy's a drug addict. I can't determine that stuff. Okay, but what I can do is say, through my experience, a drug addict will sell something right then, right there, because he can to get money. Now, you've got him, if that's the case. He's done. If you don't buy it and he takes it down the road, you don't got him, because you don't have the manpower or the money to go tri-counties away to find this guy. But you do have the power to come right down to me, open your file up. It's already on your desk because I sent it to you, and saying, this guy sold regulated metals. Is this about what you're looking for? He can take he gets in the morning, he gets, a report from the police department that says, hey, we're missing this. He goes to my file, opens it, and says, hey, here's a white truck. The white truck was reported in a crime. Okay, maybe let's check this out. Very similar amount of metal was stolen from here. Go to the videos, go to the thumbprints, go to the addresses, and you got the guy.
Mr. Cook, did I hear you correctly to say that you wouldn't find it too burdensome to, at the end of the workday, email or fax that list to the sheriff's department?
No problem.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
A couple. Do you currently take like a photocopy of their driver's license or a passport?
What we do is right now, we could. Right now what we do is we add it all into a computer file, and we have everybody on record that comes in. We know everybody that comes in. We got all their information on the computers. It wouldn't be a problem. My computer's capable of that, of just putting it in front of it and taking a picture and adding that to their file. That's not a problem.
Okay.
If that's needed, I can ask that. You only got to do the picture one time. You ain't got to do it every time. If the ID matches, because I got to actually, when you take my driver's license, I swipe it. So it goes right, they'll know if it's the right, my computer will know if it matches.
So you electronically read the information through a swipe like that?
Good. My other question, just on the air conditioning condensers and stuff, because that seems to be one of the bigger problems as far as, I guess my question is, how many of those do you see a day? Just
be honest with you, we went back and we helped law enforcement last week. They wanted to go through records. They went through records. Nothing was suspicious whatsoever but one customer. We had one customer that looked suspicious to them, and they've got his information.
Because I guess, we had an air conditioning unit replaced a couple years ago. They bring the new one in, and I guess they say, well, do you want to run this to the dump or do you want us to dispose of it for you? And I think most people tell the air conditioning company, no, you get rid of it.
Right.
So that guy you would recognize because he works for ABC Air Conditioning?
We take that information.
Right.
If they say they work for a company, we take that information. The thing with ACs is if you're a smart thief, which if they're not getting caught, they're a smart thief. It's the ones that get caught are the dumb thieves, which, are the drug addicts. Okay? If you're not stealing it in our county and turning around and selling it in our county, I can tell you right now, just as a common everyday man, that I know that if you go away, it makes it very difficult to find it. Okay? Now, if you're going around and stealing ACs and you're stripping them out, you're making them worth something, that's going to be noticed, and they know that. They know that they come in my office and they take records and they look and they profile what they say could be AC crimes. They do that now. Right now, I got detectives that come in my office. How many times a week, you think? Every day. And they go through my records, and they look, and they see what they want. I can see that can be a burden to have the detective come there. I'll send it to them.
Let me ask you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, sir. To try to help out what you're talking about, then I'm assuming that people would steal perhaps in Orlando and then come to you.
If they did,
it's the exact opposite scenario that you said they would do here.
Yeah, but like I said, because it's a regulated metal, it would be a nice record of it. And I'm sure they're interlinked somehow or another through, they can maybe make a website between all of them saying, okay.
That's what I was thinking, is to try to stem that.
We're missing this, and okay, they can go through and say, well, we got a report of having a very similar metal. We had an incident here recently that, a vehicle was identified and it helped through because we had the information on what they did and everything matched, so they're coming to us from other places just like our thieves are going to other places to sell things.
Whenever somebody shows up with you from Orlando, though, with parts, like, we'll just say AC parts, I'm almost wondering, well, if it's that easy to give to our sheriff's department, I almost wonder for anybody that's out of town, I'd be very suspect of somebody that is out of town.
Well, there's a perfect reason for the sheriff would have that information in front of them. If they look and say, this guy's from Orlando, you got 1,000 pounds of AC. That might be suspicious because they're not going to make a trip all the way from Orlando with 15 pounds.
No.
They're going to come from Orlando with 500 pounds, and they're going to get a substantial payment.
Yeah.
And the sheriff's going to look down that list and say, this guy's from Orlando. His ID says it. He's not going to have a local ID. Right there, that shows off a red flag. I even put a red star next to it if you want me to. This guy's from out of town. And he's got 500 pounds of copper. Or why is he coming to us? Because I guarantee if he's from Orlando, he could probably get better prices in Orlando. The bigger cities next to the scrap yards, next to the bigger yards, get on a common basis. If you travel Tampa or things like that, you can get a little better prices. So if them people are coming to us, because we're central, we got to ship our stuff. We're not by the ports, we're not by the yards. We got to ship all of our stuff. So if they're coming to us, there's a reason. And the detectives and the people that get this information at the end of the day can pick it up and look at it. They're going to catch those thieves too, because they got the information that They sold it. Now, there is routes. Now, understand there is routes, the smart guys are doing it, that law enforcement's not going to find. If you push them totally out of the scrapyards, there's exporters, and they're everywhere. And I'll buy the stuff up, and it goes right out the ports, right out of Miami. You never know it. It's all cash transactions. And they travel, and they're everywhere. I mean, they're everywhere. You go up there, once you're pushing the fact that they can't come and sell it with all their IDs, with all their information, they're going to look for the other routes to sell it. Which all they got to do is go find the exporter. And then it's, they don't follow our rules. They're not a fixed business. They're not a place that does that. They come in a truck, a box truck, they buy this stuff up, they take it, and it goes to Miami, it goes on a box, and it goes across seas.
And that was going to be my next question. And with only 5 registered recyclers, I'm sure you all are a pretty small community. You kind of know what the other guy's doing or what he's selling or buying copper for.
Yeah, we keep track of each other.
Okay. So that was my question about the exporters. Do you hear a lot of that coming in when you all start talking? Say, you know what, we haven't bought a single thing all day. Somebody must be in town.
Well, we got certain people come around. When they buy, that was me pushing the button actually. We got people coming in, and we know a few of the customers have went to them, because there's numbers on the side of the trucks and stuff like that. The guys that do big volume of stuff, they figure things out. It's the nature of the world. They figure out ways and routes around things, and everything that you apply, all it does is make an S turn. One thing applied to make it harder, all they do is, if you're a crook, you're a crook. You just find another way of being a crook.
Right.
It's just the way it is, and they're not going to stop being crooks. They're just going to find another way of doing it.
Any other questions for Mr. Cook? Mr. Cook, thank you very much for coming today. Is there anybody else from the audience who'd like to speak on this issue?
I've been sitting here listening to this discussion. I think both sides came. Richard Hutton, 1975, first place, Southwest.
Thank you, Mr. Hutton.
Both of these sides have presented a well-prepared plan. They didn't come here not knowing what they were going to talk about. But as I sat here listening to them and their presentations, one thing stood out to me. This ordinance will not affect the honest man, only the criminal. I realize also that business is overloaded with rules and regulations, but so are the rest of us. And we've survived with these rules and regulations because it does good for us sometimes, and sometimes harm, especially if we disagree with it. Okay? But still that outstanding remark. Honest people don't have to worry about it. These men that have the salvage business are in a high-risk business. They're in a dangerous business because some of the element that comes into their yards are less than friendly if they don't get their way. We realize that. But we have to have some way of helping the honest man do what he needs to do, and the criminal be caught and punished for what he doesn't need to do. I kind of side in with the Sheriff's Department, and their presentation was excellent. They have a difficult job. I don't want it. There are those of you that have been in this department, and you know what it is. You had a tough job. I know you did. I'm familiar with it. It's a difficult job to enforce the law and stay within the metes and bounds of the law itself, not step off and get yourself hung. So that's my comment this morning. It's not to punish the honest man, but it's to get hold of the criminal element. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hutton. I just say that unfortunately, probably almost all our laws are to deal with the proverbial 10% at the expense and the inconvenience of the 90%.
I understand that, Gary. but sometimes we have to deal with that 10%. They've gone got away with far too much already.
I agree.
I understand that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody else from the audience want to speak on this matter? Good morning. Your name and address for the record, please.
Chris Lang, Mr. Scrapp, 45th Street, 4455 45th Street. I have a statement I'd just like to read. Some of it's been covered, but I think it will help out on the situation. First, I would like to say that most secondary metal recyclers do not condone stealing. Most of us have been victims of this crime, as Shannon stated, at our facilities. Most of us applaud you for your efforts. When too many restrictions are put on thieves, in a certain county, they simply sell somewhere else. This was touched on. When this takes place, you've shot yourself in the foot. Your records, along with that sale, they're gone. And as much as we'd like to think that all the sheriff's departments share all this information, it doesn't happen. People in Orlando, at the places where these laws have been put in place, it's not working. The people are leaving, they're going to export. If it worked, I think everybody would be for it. In all honesty, it's not happening. Secondary metal recyclers are your allies, your most valuable tool. We all have all the information on hand to catch your thieves. It's state law already, as was stated. You cannot stop thieves by more regulation. You can only stop them by investigation, catch them, arrest them, put them in jail. For example, Sheriff's Department and a recycler can go over the records as we discussed. Suspicious transaction, John Doe sells 400 pounds of ACR's air conditioners and is not an AC contractor. The Sheriff's Department has to go to work. All right? It's not rocket science. We all know when a customer comes in, you can almost look at him and know this guy shouldn't have this load of material. But that's not our job. We can't arrest the guy, say you look like a thief. Okay? But we do have the information. You can look at it. It smells. The guy is a thief. Now you've got to go investigate this guy. You've got to stake him out. You've got to do the television stuff. It's not easy. You can't do it with a smartphone. You can't do it with a computer. You've got to go and say, do we put the little GPS deal on his car? Do we just hang out by his house? These people steal every day, right? Do we wait and see the truck leave in the middle of the night and we follow him? Or in the middle of the day. And we see he's going into a residential area. We hang out. We do our police thing. We investigate. We catch the guy stealing it, because I'll tell you, even with all these regulations, even with the state regulations, you can know, and I'm sure the Sheriff's Department will back me up on this, we've had it happen. You can know that guy's got a stolen load of material. It has no serial numbers on it. There's no law that says that you cannot ride around with X amount of that material at this point, unless you're a dealer or something, okay? And if there does become a law like that, it has to be a state law. Otherwise, again, they leave and do it somewhere else. Okay, so at the end of the day, this material is like a brick. There's no serial number on it, okay? And there's no law that says I can't own 1,000 bricks and I can't sell them to that man right there. And if I do, he can pay me in gold, check, mail it to me, hand deliver it. It doesn't make any difference. You can know that that transaction happened. What are you going to do about it? You can't prove they're not my bricks. There's no serial numbers on them. You've got to catch the man in the act. There's only one department that can do that. It's the Sheriff's Department. They've got to take the information. They can't just go talk to people. They've got to go observe, go after them, put them in jail. I wish there was an easier way, and good luck in your efforts.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Mr. Lang, if you don't mind, the and forgive my ignorance on this, but I'm assuming that your operation, as far as the information that, I mean, is what...
all electronic.
Yeah, that's what
driver's license swipe, pictures, everything.
Cameras, thumbprints.
Yes. Well, now, I'm sorry. I have a yard here with my partner, Keith Tagg.
Sure.
My operation is in Fort Pierce. Mine is all electronic. I believe ours is kind of a little of both, but all that information is on hand, whether it's a copy or whether it's on a computer. It's kind of a hybrid, if you will, at Mr. Scrapp.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner O'Brien.
Have you looked over the list of the regulated or proposed regulated metals?
I did, yes.
How many transactions a day would you do on average that would invoke any of those items?
Keith could answer that better.
Okay.
He runs the operation, Mr. Scrapp.
I'm Keith Tagg. I'm owner of Mr. Scrap on 4455 45th Street. The answer to your question, how many transactions in a day, that varies from day to day. Some days we don't have maybe one or two. Some days we have 15 or 20. And Shannon, I've worked with Shannon quite often. I've worked with all the police department, the county, and the city. And there is one thing that I'm going to state right now. The city police does not get along with the county police. And it's very hard to be dealing with the both of them. But as Shannon talked, the manhole covers, the electric light poles, the guardrails, the street signs, the funeral markers, we don't buy those. And I'm going to give you, for instance, during the vase stealing thing, I had a guy come in from Fort Lauderdale with a trunk load of vases. I called the sheriff's department. They came up. They said, yep, you're not supposed to buy those. One detective took them and put them in the trunk of his car. They let that man go because there was no, no
probable cause.
Well, no probable cause. There wasn't nobody reported it stolen in the county. He was a county detective. Lo and behold, 2 days later, the city police department came out here and says, we had a whole bunch of vases stolen off of US 1 up there. And I said, hey, this already happened. I got them. I got them on their paper and everything. You guys let them go. Well, who's got it? I told them who it was. Oh, gee. Well, I don't know whatever happened to that. I don't know who's got the vases today. But that's just a for instance.
So the guy said, "Oh, you can't sell. You can't buy these. So here, you can just have them then." And then
I called
he
the
left.
police department.
Okay.
And they sent a detective and the police out.
With the gentleman sitting there.
With the gentleman sitting there, yeah. Because any time that anybody comes in to Mr. Scrapp, and I see that stuff's stolen, and the police department contacted me, or an owner contacted me, or blah blah blah, we detain the paperwork. Oh, yeah, the computers are down or something like that, or yeah, this guy. Anyway, the sheriff's department came out, the county, they came out. And anyway, I didn't buy them, but they took them for evidence. They let the man go. And this has happened on numerous occasions where I have the police in there with the stolen property and they let them go. There's another, for instance. Atlantic Coast Recycling on Avenue D, which I've known for 30 years. They called me up and they said, Keith, somebody stole 600 pounds of aluminum and copper, which is the reefers out of the air conditioners. On the top one had the weight in blue paint. Anyway, I said, yeah, I got them. Here's the person's vehicle they drove in, their driver's license number, the mail, the date of birth. It was a black person at the time. Okay, great. They went down there to do a report, and I hung on to that stuff for a week. Nobody ever did anything. Then another, for instance, Atlantic Coast called me up and said there's going to be a blue recycling bin with this kind of a car. It was a blue Buick at the time. Would you please be on the watch for that? And I said, okay. Lo and behold, they came in, same car. They had them on video down there in Fort Pierce. I held them people as long as I could. And I kept calling the police department and said, look, they're here. Let's get this taken care of. And I'm going to have to let them go, because I'm not going to go out there and hold somebody and drag them out of the car, take the keys out of the car. They left, and I called up the sheriff's department again. I said, look, they're going down 43rd Avenue. They're going right by your police department. And they got them alongside the road. The police come to me and ask me what's going on. And I got them on video. I got their driver's license number, their date of birth. I got their thumbprint. I did everything. They talked to Fort Pierce, and you know what they did? They let them guys go. Yeah. And we still tease each other about that. You know, who are they going to take from next? Shannon had some stuff stolen from him. He called me up and said, hey, be on the lookout for this. I said, okay. Lo and behold, we got it. And they came out. And I don't know if they ever did anything with that or not. Then they put them in jail. Okay, well, that worked. Now, as far as what's going on here today, the stainless steel kegs and all that stuff, Shannon and I don't know who the other recycling person is here. I guess it's these people here. I don't know them. I haven't done any business with them. I don't know. Anyway, the only thing that we're basically concerned about right now, and that it sounds like, is the check. And I'm going to ask you this. Somebody comes into my yard. They've got 200 pounds of aluminum and copper, which is out of the air conditioner. And like Chris says, we know that guy stole it. How does he have this? We got videos of them coming in. We got videos of them sitting right there. We tell them to look at the cameras. We do their license plate. We do their car. We do the male, female, the date of birth. We do everything. We give, like he said, everything but the DNA on these people. And they come in. They sign it. They do their thumbprint. What's the difference if I give them a check or not? They're going to go cash that check. If I mail it, like he said, half the time, the people on the driver's license, that's not even their home address. You know, people move and stuff like that. And if we have to send it to them, like he said, who's going to keep track of that? That's going to be hard. But even if we hand them the check and they go to the stop and go, they cash that check, the police department's not going to go to them because they don't know where in the heck it was cashed. And probably 90% of these people don't have bank accounts to go cash their check, and let alone mail them.
And I think the point is that the check is the documentation, right? And we've done the documentation.
And we've done all the documentation.
It's documented to death on that end. So it's just one more document, another.
That's what I'm saying. But anyway, getting back to the question, sorry I strayed off. The aluminum and copper reefers to come in for the last, I think it would be 2 months now. Anytime we get a transaction of that, my employees put the name on this piece of paper, write out how much weight they had, and their driver's license number. Okay? I've had 2 detectives, which I don't know their names, and I probably should, but I don't because there's so many come in there, it's hard to keep track of them all. But anyway, they take copies of this. And lo and behold, them guys actually did their job. And they're the city, not the county, the city. They come out there. I even got a letter from the city chief of police because we had one guy come in there 2 or 3 times in one day. And they take this information and they go to them people's houses. And the one time the guy came in there 4 times in a day, he asked them to look inside their van. They opened up their van. There was 4 AC units sitting in there ready to be stripped. And like Chris, my partner, said, what we have to do is us recyclers, we have to give the information to the police department, and then they got to do their job. And sometimes, don't get me wrong, they don't. I mean, I've been doing this now for 16 years.
Is there is there like How do you say this? Okay, is there a way that y'all found that for either through law enforcement or through your industry that you have found says, okay, this stinks, this guy's up to something, and you send it to somebody, and now after you do that, you sent him like the phone call of the gentleman on the side of 43rd Avenue. I mean, you've done all you can do. If the law enforcement doesn't pick it up from there, or they just missed the guy, or they're out doing something more important like saving a life or something, you can't help that, I suppose, and things are going to fall through the cracks.
It tends to flame out a lot of times. Now, we don't know why, the lack of evidence, whatever the case may be.
Right.
That's my point I think is when something does not have a serial number, you can have an overwhelming amount of evidence. But when they finally get to I guess it's the DA or whatever, they say, I can't prosecute it. You can't prove it's not his. So the only way, as I was stating, the only way is good old-fashioned police work. You got to catch the guy. Yeah. You know he's the guy. He's your suspect. This guy's dirty. Let's go get him. There's only one way to do it. You can't do it sitting under a shade tree on the smartphone. You got to go hang out in the bush and wait for him to steal something. And I think that's the bottom line.
And who is out the money? Let's, like, when the guy comes in with the 400 pounds of air conditioner parts for the first time, and you're asking him these questions, and he fills out this form that says, I just decided to dismantle my air conditioner today and recycle it. And you give him the cash, write him a check, or mail him a check, whatever, however you do it. And then they come along, and somebody at that law enforcement stops by and says, hey, we believe this is stolen, and this is why. This is evidence now. Are y'all out that money?
No,
is that how that works?
We have not yet had any air conditioner parts be claimed because nobody can prove that's theirs. No. Now, there has been times where I got 2 stainless steel garbage cans. Okay? They came in, the police department came out and said, hey, be on the lookout for these. I said, well, we ain't got to be on the lookout for them, they're right there. And they said, oh, great. And they come out and they did the video and stuff, and took down their address, and they went and arrested the people. But anyway, if them people wanted that back, they would actually have to pay me what I paid for them. I couldn't make a profit off of it.
So the actual owner would have to, that it was stolen from, would pay you?
Yeah, let's say it was $100. They'd have to come out and pay me $100 and they could get it back. Now, there has been some incidents in the past where I kind of feel sorry for people, They come back, they got a knick-knack or something that's from way back when, and I just give it back to them.
Yeah.
But I guess they're out if they want it back. Because it's just not, it wouldn't be really right. I mean, I'd go out of business first. If somebody's, I'm going to go back to another story if we can. Cars, before 2008, we used to have this affidavit they used to have to fill out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, without a title. Well, let's say John Doe came out, filled out this paperwork. They sold me the car. They came back with the title somebody else. I had to give them back the car. Okay. Now, they know the system and stuff. They went into jail and they turned around and come back out. 2 months later, that same car comes in with somebody else. And they do the same paper, and I'm buying that same car from somebody else. And next thing you know, I lose the car. So anyway, we kind of stopped that. But the same instance, let's say those stainless steel garbage cans, they come back out, next thing you know, somebody else is selling them, or they sell them to Shannon. They're just making their rounds, and they're making money selling the same stuff. So that's why I think they have that. That is in law that they have to buy it back. Like
Mr. Lane, you say you have a dealership, scrap dealership in St. Lucie County?
Only for ferrous metals.
Okay.
In Fort Pierce.
Right.
He touched on something I'd like to maybe bring some light on the situation. That car situation basically got overregulated also.
Yeah.
What happened there is why we're all kind of keen to this, at least in my county, is it got so regulated that people, even if they owned a car, they lost their title, they didn't want to go get another title, a lot of times the kind of people you're dealing with, or they're from out of state, the title's in another state, it's cumbersome just to get their $100. What happened was people, and to this day, stopped selling those cars to their local dealer. Now, our sheriff's department has no record of the car. If it was a junk car that a neighbor stole from his neighbor, whatever, the records are no longer in our county. We actually caught with our sheriff's department. This went on for over a year. We had the Miami element with car carriers. And when I say car carriers, I do not mean a tow truck. I mean the 10, 11 car semi-carriers coming up in the Lakewood Park, just like a fishing boat, if you will, the big ones that send off the little fishing boats, would have the little tow trucks running around buying these cars, putting them on the semi, and running them down to Miami. That's the point, I think, about overregulation. It doesn't catch anybody else. It only runs off your records. So you'll have the same amount of thievery, but you will not find out who's stealing it because the records have left with the items.
Well, do y'all think we have a problem or not?
Absolutely.
Well, then what's the answer?
All over the country.
All right, I understand that.
The answer is
Mr. Davis, I think we're getting a
investigation.
little off point here. I mean, I don't mean to say anything, but we're getting into a lot of items which this ordinance, the proposed ordinance, doesn't touch on, and it might be good if we can get back on the track a little bit.
Okay,
if we could. Commissioner Wheeler?
I think possibly we can bring this to a conclusion. We'll see. And also, this is a preview before the public hearing. So what do we do today isn't adopting this ordinance. It's refining it for the public hearing. So I have another shot at this at the next public hearing. Sitting here listening to all this has been quite an education. And first I see this as a possible compromise between mailing the check or handing them a check.
Or any check at all.
What's the purpose of it?
Well, but I'm going on what what Shannon had said about he doesn't have a problem writing a check, it's mailing a check. I don't know what happens if you mail it to a P.O. box.
It accomplishes nothing.
Exactly. And one of the things that one of you two said that makes a lot of sense is this is one more form of documentation. It gives the appearance that we're accomplishing something, but based on what I'm hearing, I don't think that it's accomplishing anything except giving the appearance that we are accomplishing something. You've already got all kinds of documentation from what I've heard. So this is one more piece of documentation. And then where law enforcement follows up on this, it obviously depends on who the detective is and how good he is. But
and how much we want to go after these people. We agree there is a big problem and it is one pain in our neck. Don't think it's not, okay? We want it taken care of, but because we're right in the middle of it, we understand there is only one way to take care of it like any other crime.
one of the things, I can live with not mailing the check, but I still would like to see the checks. First, if I come in and sell you something, the check is absolutely no inconvenience to me whatsoever to go cash it. If I'm a bad guy coming in, then that gives them one more loop they've got to go through and one more possibility. I don't know how great it would be, but I also think that that's a plus. And if I could live with that compromise as one commissioner, say, go ahead, we'll leave the check in, but you don't have to mail it to them. I can see that as being a royal pain. And I not only sat here, I've been in business also, and I don't like all these unnecessary regulations any better than anybody else does. But like I said, we're trying to deal with the proverbial 10% at the expense of everybody else. And I think it is. It's one more document that you've already got a list of good documents. You've got licenses, you've got video, you've got all the information that they would need, and the check is a small part of that.
At my facility, I can't speak for these guys, but I know it's happened there also at certain times. We deal with hundreds of people a day, okay? I actually have a problem right now with a line down the street that's dangerous, quite frankly, okay? Waiting to get on the scale because of meeting every regulation for every transaction, okay? One more thing, writing that check, it doesn't sound like much. When you do it times hundreds a day, it just makes the line longer down the street, and it takes it longer to process the customer.
I don't know that it takes any longer to write a check than it does to count out cash and pennies and quarters and dimes, and I think that's kind of a wash.
Sir, if you can come up to the microphone, I'd appreciate it. Don't talk till you get up to the microphone. The reason is we keep a record of the meeting, and it's difficult for the clerk.
I just want to make sure. I mean, you guys, they've made great points. But the check writing that we're talking about is only on the regulated metals. Right. It's not on the rest of the.
Not on everything, just on what's
just the regulated metals.
And if I could just follow up on that, because what Keith said is,
30 pounds.
It sounds like by the time he gets the notification of something stolen, he's already bought it. Because I heard you say 4 times now, oh yeah, it's here,
Yeah.
How much of a problem, and I guess what happens is somebody comes in and steals something at midnight, they are at your door at 6 a.m., you buy it, they, even if you give them a check, they're at the cash a check by 8 o'clock, and, by the time the business owner comes in and finds out his air conditioner's been stolen, or the other scrap guy comes in and finds a big load is gone, he calls you, oh yeah, I got it, the guy's got the cash, and boom, it's all gone.
But remember, it's not identifiable, so it doesn't matter if he has it.
Okay, but let me just ask you this. If we say writing a check for the regulated things isn't that big of a problem, how much of an issue would it be to you guys if instead of a check, you wrote them some kind of like a cash receipt that they would have to bring back the next day to get cash from you?
It doesn't work, because what if they're not in town the next day? What if they're leaving right then, or what if they're they're going back to wherever they're from?
They'll go to Melbourne.
We need you're going to run the business out of the yards. What's going to happen? Because we need to finish the transaction at the time of the transaction. And let's us step out. We've done our job. We've accomplished all of the stuff that's going to get these people caught. And as Chris makes his awesome point here, is you can come in there, you got the materials, but you don't have the thief. You got his information. Now you know who he is. A lot better than what you would have had if we would have turned him out. You got the thief. He's got the stolen materials in his hand. You can't bust him for it because there's no ID on it. Okay, but you do know he's a thief now. You do have your detectives with his name saying this guy is a thief. He's got to be watched. Now next time something comes across the desk that's got his name on it, this guy's a thief. It's going to go right into the thief file. I mean, this guy right here is already noted and know he's a thief. We couldn't catch him on it, but we know he's a thief. So something he sold is probably stolen. Let's check it out.
And then just to follow up there with Jim, if you could come up, Jim, and answer that question.
Hold on. If we could, let's let these gentlemen speak, and then we'll...
But I want to address his point directly. So Jim, let's just say that scenario happens. He says, hey, we've got a guy, he's got what we believe is stolen goods. Here's all his information. We can't charge him on this crime because there's no serial number on it, but here's the guy's name and address. Does that give you enough information to either get a search warrant or to put surveillance on this guy to try to track him down? Does that give you enough legal justification?
Directly, it depends on if the information is valid. And let me literally take 60 seconds and no more of your time to try to cumulatively address everything. First, never let it be said that I let a Shakespeare quote opportunity go by, and that methinks thou doth protest too much. I think that the business owners are actually more concerned about their ability to purchase items that ultimately are stolen, and that I think that they know or should know are stolen. In fact, Mr. Take said it directly, and I wrote it down. He says, it comes in, we know it's stolen. But he proceeds, well, forgive me, his partner then said it comes in, they know it's stolen, but they're proceeding with the transaction. Directly as to the check, if you're issuing a check and you're sending it to a street address that is required, then that's an excellent lead because we know that mail is going to have to go to that street address. The information that's provided, but for the thumbprint, which may or may not be in a database, doesn't necessarily have to be valid. It's not authorized in terms of an issue of validity. There's no way of proving that the information that's provided that's required to be provided by statute is in fact valid. So the reality of it is that the only way that we have to address these particular issues is in a little more directed, a little more focused manner, is to provide us with additional information. The only extra burden is the mailing of the check within a 3-day time frame. And having run a business myself, I can assure you that I am acutely aware to the obligations and responsibilities that are imposed upon business owners by the state and by the county and by the municipalities. But I would be remiss if I didn't conclude by saying that I think that Mr. Tague's comments directed towards the sheriff's office and the propriety of our investigations are respectfully inaccurate, and I think that he has had other adversarial issues with the sheriff's office that lead to that. That being said, I just want you to consider Mr. Polakowicz's statements, Ms. Odom's statements in regards to the need for this, and I can assure you that roughly 40 other counties and municipalities in our immediate area wouldn't have enacted ordinances very similar to this if they did not believe that it was rationally related to dealing with the problem.
Two things, Mr. Harping. One is, how many times has the Sheriff's Department come across a case where they had one of those driver's licenses which was swiped and that the information on the card didn't match the person whose card was swiped?
I couldn't give you an exact number.
Okay, to me it seems like it's not going to happen. So unless you can give some instances where it has happened, I don't think that argument holds water.
I can't say that it did or
I
it
understand,
didn't.
but no. But
so
my statement was,
I won't concede that
unless
point.
you can come up with concrete instances where the swiping of the card, when the person is looking at the ID, doesn't match the person who's actually given him the card to swipe, then I'm just saying that with me will not hold too much weight.
Presumably we wouldn't know because they should not engage in the transaction. We would never know if they swiped a card, it wasn't the same person who was there, they shouldn't engage in that transaction.
Okay, then I'll go one step further. When you found out that or thought that card didn't match the person, have you then gone and checked the video and said, a video of person A came up here and that didn't match the driver's license? But just from my part, listening to everything that's said, it seems like there's a lot of, there seems to be good reason to think that the information that's given is more or less correct in the vast majority of cases. That's my point.
More or less, and I will accept that point. The issue is, though, associated with this particular ordinance is the electronic reporting requirement, where currently it's very manpower intensive for us to go to the scrap yards to look at this information, if it does or does not exist, and try to collate it. In this area, they would be required to, under this ordinance, they would be required to maintain that in an electronic format that would be available to the sheriff's office in the same way that the pawn shop has to have electronic availability for all of the pawn slips and that. And again, I'm sympathetic to the honest businessman, to the honest transaction, but we have absolutely no sympathy for anyone that's engaging in transactions where they know or should know that the items that they're purchasing and putting into commerce have been stolen.
And on that one, the idea of notification, Mr. Shannon has already indicated that he'd have no problem emailing or faxing that information to the sheriff's office, and I don't think that was the area of concern with some of the commissioners. It was the checks and the mailing of the checks. But the one other issue which I didn't address was the fact that you said that some 40 or 43 other municipalities passed ordinances with this provision in them. Well, I've seen how ordinances often get passed by different legal bodies, and the fact that a lot of other organizations did that, and often without asking the right type of questions, isn't also, I just wanted to let you know, isn't too persuasive with me. But I've seen a lot of bad ordinances go through, and that whole process of letting people speak is part of a process which helps catch some of the more onerous aspects of these ordinances before they get into law and have a deleterious impact on the individuals or businesses that we're trying to manage. So
Well, I think the questions that you've asked have highlighted the wisdom of this board.
Can I say one thing real quick? It comes down to the bottom line is, and Chris and Keith made a great point, is most of the stuff, we're not detectives. We didn't go to police academy, we're not doctors. We can't tell if a guy's a thief. And I can't tell my customers he's a thief. Now, is he going to come back? If I tell the guy, you're a thief, is he going to come back to me? I don't know if he is or not. He could just be a guy that looks like a thief. I don't know. But my whole point is, we got him. That's the best thing I can tell you. Yeah. You may not have him with the evidence you have in hand, but now you know he's a thief. If he's going to go to somewhere else, we don't have him no more. The stuff's going to get taken out of our county. It's still going to get stolen. It's just going to get taken somewhere else without no information. And it's still going to get stolen, though. Now, the police department has the power to come down to our scrapyard, which is 5 blocks away. Okay? They're not going to have the manpower to go 3 counties away to get it. It's just running the records and stuff out of town. I mean, regulated metals, if they need a little help on reporting or whatever, that's fine. You know, a mail-in check, that's just totally ridiculous to me. But if there's reporting habits needed, I mean, if there's like he said, you know, you get two transactions, maybe 15 in a day. That's not a lot.
Okay, Keith and Mr. Shannon, I think at this point we're being repetitive. If it's okay, I'd like to see if there's anybody else from the audience who'd like to speak on it. Thank you.
I just want to say one more thing.
Yes,
I didn't want to have no disrespect for the police officers. I work with them. We put a lot of people in jail. Another thing bad about this right here, they do put them in jail. They're in there for 3 days. The next thing you know, they're right back out selling stuff again. Yeah. And I just want to ask one question. I don't mind whatever you guys want to do. Who is going to sit down with us and kind of put it, hey, in black and white, how we do this? Yeah. Because this is stating that, you know, that the police department is supposed to fax us, which I guess that'll work too, but most of the time they call. I get a lot of calls from the detectives say, be on the lookout for this. But what she was saying in here, any of the regulated metal that comes in, every time somebody comes in with a piece of air conditioning parts, let it be copper, the aluminum copper, are we supposed to call them up so they can come out and look at that? I mean, are they going to have the people coming in and out of there all day long? Sometimes it's hard to get them guys here, the police, to my yard.
What the proposed ordinance requires on that point is that you notify the sheriff within 24 hours of the transaction.
Of a transaction for this regulated.
Correct.
How would that be? Through fax? I have no problem with that. I'm doing that now, basically, with 2 detectives from the city. But do we do it from the city and the county? 'Cause, I mean, I know there's 2 different, and who do we send that to? You know, they're going to have a, you know, how are we going to, I guess I'll quit talking, but who's going to, at the I know we got a problem, and I don't want to come home and have my air conditioner gone, that's for sure. But how are we going to do this?
Yeah. Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Wheeler.
Yeah. I'd like to ask Jim, if does the sheriff's office have a setup with the city where you have one clearing point and it could be mailed to the county and then forwarded to the other agencies? So you're all on the same page and not...
There's no central database that all law enforcement agencies can access that is some sort of list.
That's not what I'm asking. I'm talking locally. If they're supposed to notify law enforcement, rather than them notifying 5 different law enforcement agencies in this county, they could notify one agency, the sheriff's office, and you could forward all that information immediately to the other 4 police departments.
There's no process in place?
Okay, well,
there should be.
But there should be the burden on government, not the burden on them to call 5 different agencies.
Well, respectfully, Commissioners, I don't have to tell any one of you gentlemen up here the balance of resource versus necessity. And the issue of necessity and what is necessary first in the context of the law enforcement schedule, so to speak, versus what we have the ability to do with the resources that we have.
Well, that's an interesting question. Who do they notify?
The ordinance does specify the Indian River County Sheriff's Office.
And then what about the police departments that need that information?
The ordinance does not specify that.
Right, but the sheriff's office needs to pass that information on.
Well, there's a working relationship in that regard, but to say that there is some formal process that exists that, in other words, to indicate that there is some specific pipeline, that's not true. But our detectives work together all the time. You know that, Commissioner.
I understand that, but I'm also saying is if we're requiring them to notify the sheriff's office because it's that important, the sheriff's office should immediately, and it shouldn't be hard to set up, notify the other 4 agencies so their detectives know immediately that that information has been brought to you by them and not just stop with you, and then the other agencies are out there hanging on for a week to say, oh, yeah, we didn't know you had that information. And I know they work together, but there needs to be, if it's important enough to tell them and give them an unfunded mandate like we get from the state and the government all the time, that they've got to do this, then that information should be disseminated to the other agencies through the focal point, which is the sheriff's office.
And it is to an extent, but you have to remember that a lot of times there's a disconnect between the item and the particular offense. In other words, if there's a foreclosed home that has been stripped of its copper, we may not know for a matter of months that the copper came from that particular home because a management agency may not be in the home. We may have no idea that that home was burglarized.
Jim, I understand what you're saying. I can't imagine it'd be very difficult to set up a mail list with 4 other agencies, and when you get an email, simply forward it to the other 4 agencies. I think the Sheriff's Office could set that system up with no effort.
And Mr. Chairman, right along those same lines, in the event that we say, okay, Mr. Tagg, he asked the question, who's going to help set, who's going to explain to us how we need to abide by this ordinance? Well, I think it'd be incumbent upon it whenever you set it up electronically, you're emailing that after you scan it, with your little bit of help from the SO, it would go to all the detective departments. And then that way they could do it instantaneously from their side. But if it's going to be through a fax or something like that, that's more labor for the people that are in business, and I think that's law enforcement's job to disseminate that information, not incumbent upon our small businesses in the community.
And or Commissioner Davis, I think actually the way the ordinance is drafted right now helps cover one part of that step, which is that it come in electronic form, which essentially we can put that down to email. I think all of these facilities have email. I know we sent the proposed ordinance to all of them by email. So actually, if you have it by email, it is pretty quick to just send it to the sheriff. The sheriff bangs out on some type of blast email to the other law enforcement in the area.
That's what my thoughts were.
Okay, we have another couple who's been very patient and now ask you for any comments you have.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Teresa Vives, and this is my husband, Alex. We own Cash and Recycling. I hear the word legitimate a lot in here, and I just want to say that when Alex lost his job 1.5 years ago, we looked at the need for a recycling center right behind the dump that it sits in Roseland. And our priority is civic responsibility. My business model is basically just like keep Indian River County clean. I'm getting ready to go speak in schools, so I hear a lot of undertones that it's it's kind of a dark like pawn shop kind of business, and it's not. My other priority is I was assigned a liaison, a detective out of the county sheriff's office, and his name is Detective Forrest. He and I have a relationship. I call him a lot if I have any suspicions, if I'm confused, because what happens in the process when you become a recycler, the only thing you do is you speak to the state and they give you a permit. They license you. And you say to them, okay, I'm reading my state statute, and it's very clear, but please tell me what else I need to do. They direct you to your local county sheriff. So that was Detective Forrest. To me, I want you to have video surveillance. I want you to have a specific receipt with fingerprinting, the driver's license, everything that's been mentioned already. We do that. Alex handwrites everything out. It's a receipt that he keeps. When the detectives show up and they have someone that they're suspicious of or they're looking for stolen property, they have those receipts they look for. Detective Forrest did tell me in the beginning, 1.5 years ago, that the county wanted to do an electronic system where they communicate every day like a pawn shop, but that didn't go into effect. But we spend a lot of time communicating with the sheriff's department, and it gets to the point where what the other scrap metal recyclers were saying is it gets very daunting and confusing when you have a criminal and they tell you a criminal is coming and they want us to act a certain way or maybe buy more for them. We don't know what to do in that respect, and it gets a little bit confusing and dangerous because you don't know who you're dealing with. We've had instances where we gave the items to a detective, so then we're out, what was that, $600. So there's that whole element. But back to the idea of writing a check, the name of our company is Cash In. The whole premise of this business is people like the idea of bringing their junk in and then they get cash in their pocket. The majority of our customers are residents. We are now seeing more air-conditioned tradesmen, and they also are not going to like the idea of a check. They're just not going to like it. They're not going to feel that it's even worth it. Some people are complaining that it costs $5, $10 to cash a check, even if you do mail it to them, but you would be able to explain that better.
Like we talked about before,
about the 10% of the people that are stealing and bringing stuff to the scrap metal yards. What about the 90% that we're going to affect? Like contractors or employees that work for AC company. The AC company owners give them the unit as a compensation, and they bring it to us. That person just going to do whatever he has to do to get some money, extra money, in the end of the day. I don't see it makes sense to give a check to this guy, wait 2 or 3 days to cash that check, and like everybody said, we don't know who is who. We can assume that something is stealing or anything, but we don't really know. So with that check issue, I think that we're going to affect a lot of people. And it's going to affect business too, at one point. Because why I'm going to go cash a check for $20, $30? They're going to cost me $5 or $6 to cash it. There's a lot of issues to talk about that check. I don't see it to make any sense.
Any questions for that?
I do, specifically on the check. And this is probably one for Mr. Harpering, in the event that you had somebody that was using an ID, I mean, from what I guess you're given 10 days to change your license over to where you're living in the event that you move or something, according to the state DMV. Okay. And with that, then, and in the event somebody's using an ID that has been doctored or altered or that really or isn't them, whenever they get a check, endorse the back of it, and use that ID in that process to cash that check, are there additional penalties that you're aware of? And the reason why I say that is it might be just, you might not be able to catch them for the stealing metal that doesn't have a serial number on it. But if you catch them using a false ID to cash a check that they've been written, it might still be just enough to lock up a criminal, is what I'm thinking.
It may be, but again, I think that to quote Commissioner Solari, we've sort of gotten far afield from where we're going with this ordinance, and the reality of it is if you look at the detailed description of those items in the ordinance that are covered, those are the only things that are covered, and this is not going to affect the vast majority of individuals who come into scrap items. Only those items that are specifically detailed in that. And while we certainly can have other avenues in looking at people uttering forged instruments, using fake IDs, perpetuating frauds due to fraudulent identification, we can and we do look at all those issues. But I again want to hasten to bring your attention to the very limited nature of the ordinance and the limited types of items that this particular ordinance is addressing in order to hopefully persuade you that it's a valid governmental purpose to pass this ordinance.
Sir?
I forget about the checks. The main issue is about mailing that check. I don't think all the other scrap yard says it's not a problem for us to give a check right there. It's just that mailing check. We're going to affect a lot of more people, and it's going to affect business.
Thank you very much. Anybody else from the public? One more.
Just to your question. On my receipts, when you fill it out and you sign your name, you are saying it's a written remedy, it's a felony to put any false information on this ticket. And the police have made several convictions in my yard for that. Couldn't get him on the crime, but to your question, yes, they got him for uttering a forged instrument. Okay. Felony. They've done it on several occasions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir, come on up. Your name and address for the record, please.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Ricardo Kemp, 4105 32nd Avenue, Vero Beach. I was wanting to address you guys this morning. I had a similar incident, and this gentleman assisted me I own property at 4105 32nd Avenue. I'm property manager of Carmen's Manor. My mom, who was a school teacher here for 42 years, I inherited that property approximately 9.5 years ago. After 22 years in the United States Navy, I came home to manage it. And while doing so, I ran into several incidents with tenants moving and leaving, I guess you could say, raw materials behind. I had an old car. I want to specifically speak on this. This gentleman had abandoned this car in the yard. It was on blocks. The car had been there about 90 days. I told the gentleman while he was renting from me at the time if he could, somehow get rid of the car. It was an eyesore to the property. Well, the tenant left owing me money. I contacted Mr. Scrap, Chris. He came out. He says, listen, you just can't sell this car. There's an ordinance in place. He informed me. He showed me documentation. He gave me forms. And he would not give me cash for that car. Now, I told him, I don't care. I want the car off my property. It's an eyesore. I don't care what happens. Get it off my property. This is my land. And so this is what happened. I went to the sheriff's department and I talked with one of the liaisons there, and she informed me, she said, you need to find out if there's a VIN number, which I did. There was no tag on the car. They ran the VIN number. It was not registered. He would later write me a check. He wouldn't give me cash. I did the fingerprint thing. They gave me my driver's license, my military ID. He knows where I live. In other words, I thought that was substantial in the process. If there was any thought that I had stolen this gentleman's, I'm the guy. Yeah. And I just wanted to clarify that. Sometimes common sense beats all. And what I'm hearing here today is these gentlemen are in respectable businesses. I've dealt with them. I've taken scrap metal from the property where people have left things behind, old bicycles, even a scooter once, and gotten some money because most of the time the people have left owing me money. So therefore, what I'm saying is I think we should take a common sense approach to the whole aspect of what's being presented, because the check is a good thing. I don't think mailing the check, having been in the military, listen, postage is 44 cents per parcel if it's mailed. That goes into their revenue in that they've got to pay the postage to mail those checks out. I was presented with a check. I had to go and cash it. I had to put my thumbprint. And I'm just, sometimes we can do overkill when it comes to small business. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming here today. Anybody else from the public? Gentlemen, I'll start with Commissioner Wheeler. Any final comments?
Well, I think I kind of said where I stood. I think we're in good shape here. I don't have a problem with writing the check for the listed things here, but I don't know that, even though it'd probably be a light number, I don't know that it's necessary to mail it.
Commissioner O'Brien.
Yeah, on the mailing thing, if it's only 20 transactions a day, that's still $8.80 a day. That's still $44 a week, and over the course of a year, it's $2,300. Now, I realize those aren't tremendously big numbers, but I'm sure to these guys, $2,300 could pay a lot of bills over the course of a year. So I don't think the mailing is necessary. And I really believe, even if all 5 of the registered guys, if they got a load of stuff that they thought was stolen and said, okay, we're not going to take it, that guy is still going to find a place to sell it somewhere. And it seems to me at least some information on a crook is better than no information on a crook. So I agree with their points that it's not their job to be law enforcement, but they're collecting all the information that would allow law enforcement to do their job. So, and I've heard from several here that writing the check for the 20 transactions a day they do for these regulated metals would not be an unnecessary burden to them, but the mailing would be. So I could support moving this forward and scheduling a formal public hearing, because there has been a lot of good discussion on this. But I think getting this information on the crooks is much better than not getting anything, and hopefully this will help move that forward.
And I'm pretty much in the same place. Certainly items 3 and 4, which deal with having to mail the checks or have payments electronically after the fact. I don't see how I can support that. It's a little thing, but if you write out a lot of checks to different people who are floating around in a lot of places, they may not cash them. And just doing your books is a pain. I mean, I know the one guy who does a property for me up in Wabasso and mows it. He never cashes his check until about 45 days later. So I always have to worry about that in my checking account. And it's a small thing, but it matters a little bit. The other thing which we haven't mentioned here, which I think the ladies from Roseland really helped bring out, is that there is a sort of undercurrent of sort of shady things that may be going on here, but we missed the opposite side of the fact that all these places are doing a real valuable job for our community. What would happen if you couldn't make 10 cents on a aluminum can, or the gentleman with the rental unit, if you couldn't make the $5 on a bicycle that's going for scrap? When you add this all together, you're talking about amassing a small army of people who are taking stuff out of garages and making good use of them, who are preventing stuff from going into the canals because, hey, I can either toss this into a canal or maybe get $2 from Mr. Scrap. And when you accumulate all that, I think it's a very valuable service for the community. So I'd like to say two things to all you who came. One, thanks for that service, but also thanks for really helping to elevate the discussion here. And this is one of the reasons why we like public comment and appreciate you all taking time from your business day to come. So with those remarks, I'll pass it to Commissioner Davis.
Yeah, I think I've pretty much heard a consensus here as far as the check. I mean, okay, if you feel like we need to have a check written, but as far as mailing it, and I understand that. Once you touch a transaction, there's no need to double your line, as you just mentioned. You'd have, double the work to do. I don't think that's necessary. If it winds up not working, Mr. Harpering, I'll be man enough to come back and revisit the ordinance if there's that many things falling through the crack because of it not being mailed. I think that we'll really get to the point where we would like to be with it all, and I'm I think ready to move forward with it. But I appreciate. First of all, I apologize for every one of y'all having to take time out of your schedule to come down here and work. Do this, but thank you for being here. And as this ordinance comes through, I would like really y'all said there's a problem. We understand there's a problem, but you know probably better than our legal department what should be in the ordinance, what works for you and what doesn't. So you're an integral part of that process, and we want to make it work for y'all as much as we want to make it work for our legal department as well as our law enforcement. So thank you for coming down and helping us make a better ordinance.
So I think that county attorney probably has an understanding of where we're going.
Yes, the county attorney does. I'd just like to note for the different recyclers, we'll be bringing this back probably in 1 month, probably the first Tuesday in October. We will send you notice, et cetera, as we did this time, so you have another opportunity to come in and talk if you wish.
And I'll ask if there's a motion to bring this forward.
Second.
The move to bring it back in form of ordinance is made by Commissioner Wheeler, second from Commissioner Davis. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes 4-0. Everybody, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And right now we'll take a 10-minute break. Time to reconvene the September 6th meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. We are still at County Attorney Matters. Mr. Polakowicz, quasi-judicial proceedings, please.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. As the Board knows, most of what the Board does falls into one of two categories. One is legislative matters, and the other are quasi-judicial matters. Quasi-judicial matters are subject to a fair amount of law, and there are quite a few requirements that the Board has to comply with respect to quasi-judicial matters. Due process of law applies, etc. In part because of that, back in 2009, the Board adopted Resolution 2009-004, which included certain requirements with respect to quasi-judicial proceedings. We had a discussion about this back in June of this year, June 14, and the board voted to repeal that older Resolution 2009-004. I brought forward on August 16 a resolution to repeal the prior resolution, but I also kind of took it on my own to go one step further and come up with some proposed guidelines on quasi-judicial proceedings. My purpose in doing so was to make sure that we had basically a clear statement of how we conduct quasi-judicial proceedings in Indian River County. My thinking being that if we have a clear statement, that everybody who's involved in a proceeding can look at and read and understand, then the likelihood of unintentional errors or just misunderstandings and difficulties during the proceedings would probably be reduced, and therefore hopefully lead to a better result. So I prepared quasi-judicial guidelines. I brought them to the Board back on August 16. The Board did have a couple of suggestions. One was to add language requiring that staff notify commissioners when we see a quasi-judicial matter which may be coming before the Commission in the future, so you would be aware that it's coming before you. And number two, that we would notify the Commissioners through some type of sample notice that would kind of generally summarize the requirements of the guidelines. So we have prepared a sample notice which is attached in part of your package. I lastly added one more sentence based on our prior discussion, which basically said that commissioners should refrain from making public statements either for or against an application that's going to come before the Commission in a quasi-judicial proceeding. So at this point, I'm proposing that the Board consider the resolution that's on page 394 of your package. That resolution repeals the 2009 resolution, and it incorporates the new guidelines which start on page 396. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for Attorney Polakowicz?
Mr. Chairman, the only comment I have, Alan, is on the notice to commissioners.
Yes.
It says when county staff becomes aware of a contested quasi-judicial. I would just like to see the word contested deleted, and that staff would notify us of any quasi-judicial. Just as an example, the A1 Raleigh actually got all the way through the P&Z meeting before it became hotly contested. So, and you're asking staff to make a judgment call on what may or may not. I'd just say when they get that first application where they say this will be a quasi-judicial issue, boom, notify us in, and then we know, and not wait till it becomes contested.
I mean, because if you wait till the point they start picking shirts with colors, it's way too late.
Right. And you probably have already spoken to somebody by the time that happens. So I'd just say any quasi-judicial, send us the notice.
That's fine from my standpoint. I wish Bob Keating were here to comment on what that's going to do in terms of the number of notices you're going to get, because I know they deal with a fair number of quasi-judicial matters on consent agenda. So I think you can expect that you will start receiving a fair number of notices.
Mr. Chairman, this issue came up before Planning and Zoning when I made a presentation to them last Thursday. That was exactly their question, whether or not these set of procedures would be invoked on every quasi-judicial matter. My response to them was no, only on the contested matters. I don't know if you want to go through the litany of disclosures and pronunciations by the individual commissioners if the matter is non-controversial. Would then these procedures be followed every single time that a quasi-judicial matter would come up?
No, not if it's a consent.
I would say let's go back to A1 Wally, and it came before P&Z. There wasn't much, nothing was highly contested.
One person.
But say the applicant had talked to the P&Z members prior to it coming, that would be an ex parte communication. Because they weren't notified, because at the time staff didn't think this was contested, they didn't disclose the fact they had had conversations, the ex parte. And then could they not come back and say, wait a minute, all you guys talked to this guy was ex parte communication and you didn't disclose it. So I'm more of the one, send me the email and I can open it up, say, okay, such and such subdivision is requesting this, it's going to be quasi-judicial, and then I know. But I don't think that's a unnecessary burden.
Yeah, that's fine because we're talking just about the notice. I do want to make clear that there is language up in that first paragraph which was added as a result of the planning department's request, that these guidelines don't prevent a board from considering an uncontested quasi-judicial matter on a consent agenda.
Yeah.
So it can be put on a consent agenda. So we'll treat Commissioner O'Brien's comment with respect to the notice alone. We'll certainly send notice of all quasi-judicial proceedings.
Okay. Commissioner Wheeler?
No, if there's a whole lot of these that are quasi-judicial that aren't contested, I guess, and Wally was a good example that Commissioner O'Brien used that could happen, but how often does that happen? Secondly, with all of this, you're either going to be honest and disclose or you're not. And the bottom line is, and I agree with this, and we should have something in place. But to try and enact things that are going to correct somebody that's dishonest or disingenuous isn't going to happen. So and I'll probably, and probably all of us have in the past, we've talked to people that we didn't know at the moment was a quasi-judicial issue. And when it comes up, it's brought to our attention. It is when the backup material ends up in front of us and is up in front of us here. And usually the question is asked if any of us have discussed that, and we've all disclosed it. So I think that I don't want to try and keep a list of, a running list of 20 or 30 or 40 different projects that I have to be careful that I not talk to those people, and then the media picks up on something that comes up because I talked to somebody because I forgot it was on that list and said, well, he went outside the ordinance. So I want to be careful of being of being accused of something that's not done with any intent. So I think we've got to be careful about that, and I don't want to box us in a corner where you look like a bad guy before you are a bad guy. And the bottom line is you have the opportunity to disclose that at this, and I think I can speak for myself, and I think for other commissioners, there's no deal breaking going on or no deal cutting going on in the background here. I think we run a pretty responsible board here. But so anyway, those are my comments.
Any other comments?
The only other thing I'd like to add to it is to, as far as the actual process, once we get this in place, I really like the script that Bob used and how that was very professional on a heated matter like that. So anytime we do have one that is contested, I think that ought to be something. Basically, the attorney's office ought to hand the chairman at the time and say, here, this is what you got to do to keep it above board and legitimate and make sure everybody's sworn in and go through that process. That was a very good exercise, I think.
The only thing I'd like to add, just kind of related to this but not, is I know we get emails from the attorney's office keeping us informed. Many things coming along that give us a head up, and I like that. We hadn't got that in the past, and I think that's a good thing and a positive thing, and I appreciate it, Alan.
Thank you.
Well, I'm just going to ask if there's anybody from the public who wants to speak on this. There being nobody, Chair will entertain a motion.
Chairman, I'd like to move the resolution with the one change to delete the word contested in the notice to commissioners. And to Commissioner Davis's point, there is some order of proceedings listed here, and that we follow with the A1 Wally, and I'm sure that the Attorney's Office will continue to provide that. So I think that did cover Commissioner Davis's issue. So I'd move adoption of the resolution with the one change to delete the word contested from the notice to commissioners.
We have a motion from Commissioner O'Brien.
I'll second that.
Second from
discussion.
Commissioner Davis, under discussion.
I would like, before I support that, I'd like to hear from Mr. Keating and what the ramifications of this are and how many emails it's going to entail and so on and so forth.
Okay.
We have a motion on the floor. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes 3-1. Commissioner Wheeler dissenting. Item C, amended resolution of necessity for Laurel Homes parcel of property located on 66th Avenue. Mr. DeBrawl.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Bill DeBrawl, Deputy County Attorney. This amended resolution refers to a parcel of right-of-way the county needs to obtain from Laurel Homes, Inc. You previously passed a resolution of necessity earlier in this matter. We need to go back and amend the resolution to reflect a small change. You'll see it on page 2. And it's been further refined and reviewed and approved by outside counsel. The paragraph highlighted on your screens there as to parcels 16 and 16A now includes a reference for a time frame for the temporary construction easements. You will see that they are specifically called out and that they last now for a duration of 18 months following acquisition. What we're asking the board to do is go ahead and approve the amended resolution and authorize the chairman to sign it on behalf of the board.
Motion to approve from Commissioner Davis.
I'll second that with just a question for staff.
Second from Commissioner O'Brien. Commissioner O'Brien.
Yeah, Bill, are we really good on that 18-month time period?
Yes.
I mean, is this, if we do this, are we starting work tomorrow? I mean,
no, we will not start work on it tomorrow. I note that this is from the date of acquisition, 18 months from the date of acquisition. I've had this approved by engineering, and they've assured me that this is a sufficient time period in which to complete the necessary construction on this part of the job.
okay. Is there a legal reason we just couldn't stick in 24 months now just to give it some extra wiggle room, or is that a...
The appraisal report evaluated the TCEs for an 18-month period, so that's why we're bound by the 18-month period.
Okay.
We have the motion from Commissioner Davis, second from Commissioner O'Brien. Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 4-0.
Thank
Chairman.
you, Commissioners.
Commissioner Wheeler.
I think Mr. Baird called Mr. Keating, and
Fine. We'll ask Mr. Keating if he'd like to come up to be asked a question by Commissioner Wheeler.
I'd like, if I was him, I'd say no.
Oh, yeah. But Bob's too much a gentleman to say no. Hello, Bob.
Good morning. I'm Bob Keating, County Community Development Director.
the question was, is what does it entail by taking contested out in the quasi-judicial resolution where, I mean, how many are we going to get? What does this do to work as far as staff goes, emails, keep us informed of the whole list rather than the ones that are more controversial, which sometimes we won't know about?
Yeah, Bob, the question is directly related to the notice that staff has to provide to the commissioners. Currently, it reads, staff will provide notice of any contested quasi-judicial matters. And Commissioner Wheeler, the vote has been to take out that word contested so that now you would be providing notice of all quasi-judicial matters which may end up before this board. So how many notices will that entail, do you think?
I think what we'll probably be doing is sending you pre-application meeting notices and technical review committee meeting notices, because those will list all the projects we have. Almost all the projects that come in for pre-apps or for review at the technical review committee are quasi-judicial. So, and we have pre-app meetings every Monday and technical review committee meetings every Wednesday. Of course, in the past year or two, we've been canceling a lot of those. But most likely what we'll do is we will send you those agendas and those note on them that the project is a quasi-judicial project.
How many do you think that?
It really varies.
I mean, are we going to make, I'm trying to follow this. Am I going to have my aide have a list on the bulletin board, and when somebody calls and wants to talk to me, is that about any of these issues here, and so on and so forth? And if it is, we got to check it off because you can't talk to the commissioner about that.
That's not what the ordinance says now.
Huh?
The ordinance doesn't say we can't talk to them.
Well, that you need to disclose it, but I mean, it'd be nice. Okay.
I understand what you're saying, Commissioner, but I think that really Alan has put a lot of wiggle room in there. Not to be evasive, but there's a lot of information that flows through. Somebody does talk to you about it in passing. I understand exactly what you mean, and I guess it's really the intent of what we approved is going to be the integrity behind it. And to me, it's better because at one point we were told we couldn't even talk to anybody about it in advance of the meeting.
Let me take a hypothetical. You get the list. This is quasi-judicial. You're out to lunch someplace, and because of the numbers on the list, I don't know how many will be there, somebody comes over and starts talking to you. You don't recall that it's on the list. So then something comes up, I don't know what, but let's say, things happen politically, and somebody complains and says, well, Wesley got this list, he saw the name on there, and then he was at lunch and talked to this guy about it because I overheard him. And then the press writes a nice story about that, how you're dealing under the table.
How comes it's me? Why couldn't it have been Bob or somebody?
No, but I'm saying, that's how it works.
I understand, and I don't know. I mean, so what is are you saying to leave in the contested side of it?
I'm not sure. I just see us. We constantly try to do things to keep people honest, and nothing keeps people honest except themselves.
Yeah, somebody being honest.
I mean, I think we can address it by just saying, the type of thing of reasonable. When we say that, no, I don't recall any conversations.
Okay.
I mean, that type
and
of
that's the script.
It is, and that takes care of itself. I mean, most of the things you're talking about will never occur because they'll never get before us. And the fact that it gets controversial will most of the time remind us.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, then it's usually happened so many months before that reasonable people, and I think, might be a problem with this board, but the people will understand that, this was months before. It hadn't got to the point where it was actually an issue yet. So I think that for the most part we'll act with a little more common sense, and that our citizens will act with a little more common sense than we might expect.
Yeah. But I do see your concern, Commissioner, but that's why I would think the script part that I had mentioned is very important, because the chairman, whomever that may be, will say, okay, does any commissioner have any known?
Yes, and I agree with that.
And then I could say, I have no known. Then somebody says, yes, you did. Oh, okay, I forgot. And they're right, I did speak to such and such on that date about...
Just don't do it again.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And I'll take one different stand than you take, Commissioner Wheeler, about saying that only people who are trying to get away with something will sort of worry about it, and none of us are trying to get away with something. Well, I think the other way of looking at it is, basically it's good to have a set of rules of the game which everybody has an understanding of, and having the quasi-judicials come before us at a regular basis reminds us that this is where we're playing, and it just sets sort of a process in place which helps us do a little more open and transparent job, which is what we want anyway. So rather than seeing it as a burden, I look at it as more as a helping tool for the commissioners, just to keep us thinking on some of the issues which we might be thinking of. That's all. So,
you want to change your vote and get on the winning side now?
Yeah. Or do you want to stay on the wrong side all the time?
Can we do that?
You're stuck. You have one more bad vote, but it's just one more. So.
Thank you, Bob.
My reason, let me explain my reason for the vote, and I think it was clear, is that I wanted to hear from Bob first and find out what additional burden this was.
Sure. You were wrong, and we feel better about it.
Okay.
If it's okay with you, gentlemen, I'm going to move on to special districts and boards.
Mr. Chairman, move approval of the Solid Waste Disposal District minutes of July 13 and July 19, 2011.
Motion from Commissioner Davis, from Commissioner O'Brien, seconded by Commissioner Wheeler for both minutes. All in favor, please give your approval.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Both pass 4-0. Thank you very much. On to the 2011 petition hearing, solid waste disposal district assessment fees.
Move staff recommendation.
Second.
We have the motion from Commissioner O'Brien, the second from Commissioner Davis. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 4-0. Environmental Control Board, approval of the minutes of the meeting of May 24th.
So moved.
The motion is from Commissioner Davis. The second is from Commissioner Wheeler. All in favor? Aye. Gentlemen, did you?
Yeah,
You're all for it? 4-0. Report of activities of the third quarter fiscal year 10-11.
We accept the report of activities.
Second.
The motion is from Commissioner O'Brien. The second is from Commissioner Wheeler. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much, gentlemen and audience. We are now adjourned.